this big Mother's Day sale text. So just make sure in your layers panel here you have the layer that you want to change selected. It's kind of this light gray. And down the bottom here, there's this little FX button. Click on it. Okay, and here are all the things we're going to look at in this tutorial. Okay, so we'll start with drop shadow. It's the easy one. Now mine, you can see it's added a drop shadow. We've got this big thing in the way. To move it, see this kind of light gray area here, just click, hold and drag it to get it to a point where you can see what you're doing in the background here, and yeah, work with this panel. Now it'll remember the last thing you did, so yours is going to look a little different from mine. So let's look at the basics. Okay, so let's look at the distance first. Crank it right up, get it up to like 25. You can see it's the distance away from the type there. Then this angle here becomes a little bit more obvious. You can see I'm just dragging this little dial here, and that's just kind of the way that the light affects it. Okay, so it's up to you what you want your drop shadow to do. Let's look at these other two, and before I give you my kind of like the way I do drop shadows. Anyway, spread you're not going to use too much. It depends on whether the kind of feathering is pushed right to the outside. It kind of does a weird choke around the outside. Don't use spread. The main one is size. Size is how fuzzy it is. Okay, so you can see I'm dragging it smaller. You can see it's got, when it's down at 6 points, okay, you can still kind of see the text, but if I get quite high, it becomes this kind of like vague blur. Now, if you're like, how's it working? Is it better? Turn this preview on and off, just get a sense of what it's doing. Okay, so it's really up to you what you want to do. What I like to do is I like a straight up and down, okay, angle. So I put a 90 degrees, and I like the distance quite low, and I like the size quite low. So it will depend on your image and text. Okay, so I do like about maybe 5 by 0 by 5 is kind of where I end up being. You can see this, it's just a subtle turning it on and off. I don't know, I like that kind of drop shadow. You don't have to like it. Okay, but yeah, kind of play around with that to get the settings you like. Let's look at doing one more, and we'll bring up some options. So if we click OK, we're done. Let's say I want to edit it again, because you're like, man, I wish I would change it again. You double click on this word drop shadow, okay, and it opens up. So you can go and make amendments. Click OK. So let's do it to the save the date along the top here. Actually, let's do it to the photo. This one here, the name of the photographer. So let's select the layer. Let's go down to effects. Let's add a drop shadow. And let's say we want to do something different here. Okay, because it's smaller text, and can I zoom in? I can. I can still use my shortcut to zoom in, which is kind of cool. Using my spacebar key to drag it around. So what I want to do is I want to do something different here, because the size and distance don't work for this thing. And same with the angle. And the angle is the big, I guess, important one. It's this thing called global light. So what ends up happening, if you use the word global light, it just means that if I change this one for this text, it's going to affect everything else. Okay, so it's going to say, it's going to adjust this one. So if I want to adjust this one separately, I have to untick it. Let's look what I mean. If I rotate it around here, because I feel that's better, because it's on an angle, can you see it adjusted, this one here? I'm going to push around, you'll start to see. Okay, so the trouble with this, I'm going to put it back to 90. So they're all at 90. Then I'm going to untick this, and now watch this guy here. I'm going to crank up the opacity. That's one thing I didn't mention in the last one, the opacity. Okay, how much you can see of it. Crank it up 100% so you can see. And this one here, 5 by 5 doesn't really work. So I'm going down 3 by 3, okay, to kind of get it to come out, but the opacity down a little bit. But because global light's off, it's not affecting the angle here. Cool, let's click OK. Let's look at another way of kind of like lifting text off the page. We'll use bevel and emboss. Now, bevel and emboss works really well with thick text. It's not going to work with any of this kind of like lightweight text. So I'm going to click on this one here, 100%, make sure it's selected in my layers panel. Down here, let's go to bevel and emboss. Okay, and I'm gonna move it out of the way, it's always in the way. There we go, there, that'll work. Cool, so these are the defaults, okay, and it's a bit of experimenting here. And you can kind of look at this as a kind of a really clear indication of what's happening, and down here, how it's affecting the type. First of all, the style. Emboss tends to look, emboss does both the outside of the text and the inner part, okay. Pillow emboss kind of looks like it's sitting in something. Outer bevel, just the outside, so it's kind of lifting off the background. There's different techniques for kind of deciding, it's a personal choice here. Okay, I don't like bevel much at all, but people do, so we'll show them. Okay, so what am I going to use? I'm going to use inner bevel. And let's have a quick little look. Smooth, chisel hard, just look at the edge here, it gets a little bit more, you can see there. Ooh, I kind of like it, kind of do, almost there. Depth is how, basically it's how much the shadows you get, okay, how extreme it looks. I feel like it should be bank letters on the front of a bank or a lawyer's building. It needs this kind of like chiseled. You need to use Trajan, the font, and you need to use chisel hard bevel. Again, size and soften, they're going to kind of make sense as you experiment with them. You can kind of see it says here how much, like, depends on how thick your type is. If it's really thin, you're not going to see anything. In this case, you can't see much of a change either because the font's quite small. Okay, so and it goes kind of a flat spot on the top, which I don't like. Okay, soften. Not sure why you go chisel hard and soften it, but anyway. There's more and more complexity you can get into here. At this Essentials course, we're not going to go into like the super hardcore stuff. Just play around with it, experiment with it, until you get it how you like. When you finish, click OK. One of the things I want to show you, and one of the other, I'm going to combine two things we're learning. One is one of the other effects. So I want two effects applied to this thing. I want to change the color of it as well. So the effect is called color overlay, but how do you add more than one? Okay, you can do it by double clicking where it says bevel and emboss, open it back up again. And you can see on the top here are all the other options I had down the bottom in this effects panel. Okay, so bevel and emboss, we're going to look at color overlay. Watch this, if I turn the tick on, it's working. It's kind of made it a different color. But there's a bit of a gotcha. What ends up happening is I've turned the tick on and off, but you can see over here it still shows bevel and emboss. Look, because I can turn lots of these on. Okay, I need to actually click on the word color overlay to bring up the options for it. So you might be ticking this on and then thinking you're at there, okay, or at least say, let's turn it again, tick that on, and thinking you're there making adjustments but nothing's changing. Okay, it's because you need to actually click on it. So I'm going to turn all of these off except for color overlay. Color overlay, I'm going to click on it and click on this little square here. Yours is probably set to red by default. It remembers the last thing you did. Like when we're picking font colors, you can just drag this hue slider to get it to somewhere you want. Okay, and pick a color. It'll never be that bad. I'm not sure what color I'm going for, but you get the idea, right? So drag the hue slider up, click in here for the circle you want, and then just keep an eye out here how it affects my chisel. All right, if you're looking for branded colors, you might type in the RGB colors here or the CMYK colors if you have it, or maybe the hexadecimal numbers to be really precise. Let's click OK. So we've got two things applying. Let's click OK. So those are a couple of effects, and we've used those mainly to kind of make the text pop off the page. What I'm going to show you is a technique that I use. It's not an effect, but it does the same type of thing. It's just using a big old rectangle. So you saw it at the beginning, okay, in the intro. So if you grab the rectangle tool, the only trouble with what we've got here is last time we were using it, remember we were using the ellipse tool to do the badge, okay? And as soon as we went to the ellipse tool, we changed it from shape to path, which is going to cause problems now because we don't want a path, we want an actual big shape, okay? So the path is just kind of like an invisible outline, whereas the shape's an actual thing on the page. So rectangle tool, shape, up at the top here, fill color, click on it, pick a color from the swatches, I'm just picking black. If you want to get a bit more detailed, you can click on this option, gets you back into our lovely color picker. So I'm just going to use black. Click off from the top here, and for the stroke, I'm going to have no stroke, which is this little red line here that says, I don't want any color, please. Click off. What am I going to do? I'm going to draw a rectangle that kind of starts off the page and kind of goes in here. Cool. I'm going to move it back to my move tool. I'm going to move it down a little bit. The trouble is that it's on top of my text. Yours might be different depending on kind of what you last were doing. So like before, remember in our layers exercise, we're going to click, hold, and drag rectangle down, way down the bottom here. I'm just dragging it just in front of my flower. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the Lorem Ipsum text now, move tool, I'm going to try and drag it down. Now, what you might find is moving stuff is quite tough. Okay, and we're at a point now where, I don't know, like this might be an option for you. I prefer to have the move tool and have auto select off. Okay, auto select on just means whatever you click on, watch the layers panel over here, when I click on the background, it jumps to it, jumps to that, which is kind of cool, right? I find, especially with really thin type like this, I just turn it off, okay, and I just make sure I'm very consistent over here in my layers panel. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the course. I'm going to say, be on this layer, move tool, and it doesn't really matter where you click now, it's going to move that particular layer. It's not going to automatically do it. Cool. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, a little bit. Cool. and I want to lower the opacity quite a bit. So with the rectangle layer selected, let's lower the opacity of this. It just makes it a bit more see-through. Yeah. So that's just another technique instead of using drop shadows. You see it quite a bit, yeah. But you might hate it. That's okay. You might love the chisel Goblin boss. That's okay too. All right. Next thing we'll just look at one or two more. You can experiment with them all. We'll look at putting a stroke around the outside. Let's do it to the mother text. So Mother's Day sale. Okay. Double click because we're going to add two to it. Remember, drop shadow and double click. And we're going to add a stroke around the outside. Remember, turn the tick on, make sure you're actually there. It goes gray. Okay, and you'll see I've got a little stroke around the outside. Let's zoom in a little bit using my shortcut keys. There's kind of two things to work with. One is I'll change the color first of all. So color down here, pick a hue. I'm going to go for that kind of like orangey thing I was doing before. And let's crank the size up. Okay, size is too much at the moment. Okay, what we want to do is, the position is inside, which is doing weird stuff to my type. You might like it. I'm going to go to the outside, so it's like a stroke around the outside of the type. Okay, and then you can do this kind of thing. Now we're doing it with type. It can be done with any sort of shape. Okay, that rectangle can have a stroke around the outside. An image that you've masked out can have a low stroke around the outside. Yeah, it's up to you. All right, let's do one more before we go because it's kind of cool and kind of gets us into some slightly more, not advanced, but just growing our learning in Photoshop. So I'm going to zoom all the way out, Command 0 or Control 0. Actually, I might go one more. And we're going to work on this layer here, layer 1. Let's be a bit more proper about it. Double click layer 1 and call it flowers. Return. You actually have to double click on the actual letters there to be able to type over the top. So we're going to do a gradient overlay. Why? Because it's super in fashion now. If you're watching this and it's like a 10-year-old course, it's not going to be super fashionable, but at the moment we love a bit of gradient overlays on images. So let's have a look. Okay, with the layer selected, it's great. Let's go to Effects. Let's go to Gradient Overlay. Okay, and depending on what you, if you're brand new to it, yours is going to look pretty close to mine. You might have adjusted yours in the past. So what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. We're going to pick a nice gradient, okay, and then we're going to go and look at how to blend it with the background. Now, deciding on nice colors for gradients, Envato's got, let's have a little look. I just Googled in the Envato elements, okay, and there's just lots of good ideas for gradients in here. Just type in gradients in the search and just have a look and find stuff. Like this particular gradient background pack has some really cool colors that you can, get ideas from. So once you've got an idea for a gradient, jump back into Photoshop. And you drop down this little gradient arrow here, this little chevron, click on that, and you've got some built-in ones. Oh my goodness, there are some bad ones. Okay, these have been in here forever. Like, yeah, they're bad. Anyway, let's click on just this kind of standard black to white one. It's a good, easy one to start with. Now click it back in. Now to adjust the actual color, click anywhere in this kind of color box here. This big ugly thing opens up and we can go in and adjust the colors. Now you're just using these bottom little cubes here, like little houses. Don't use the top ones. So the bottom one's here. If you double click on it, you can use your hue slider to get the hue you want. Okay, and then pick a color. I'm gonna pick a color that I saw, kind of like an orangey peach color. I figured that out earlier on when I was playing around. Okay, click OK. So that's the beginning of it. Double click this last one and do the end. And I figured out the color that I wanted. Okay, I just copied and pasted it from when I was playing around before. Okay, let's click OK, and let's click OK again. Now, gradient overlay is kind of cool, okay? The thing is, it's ruined my image, but you saw at the beginning there I had a kind of a mixture with the backgrounds, and this is something to do with something called the blending mode. Now, blending modes are super awesome and handy. Normal does exactly what it kind of meant to, okay? But if you have a play around with any of these other ones, it's going to affect the background a lot better, okay? So let's look at dissolve. It's never a great one. Darken starts getting a bit more exciting, and it's kind of cool what it's doing, right? Always in the way. Let's move you over there. Can't. Okay. That'll do. And you just got to keep going through this list. Multiply. It's kind of cool. Then you burn. I already had a play, and I liked like overlays, kind of a cool one, and so soft light. But I really liked hard light. Where are you, hard light? Why can't I find you? You can see it. Oh, there he is. He's the next one down. Okay, it's a bit strong. Okay, I know we're kind of, I guess, like we're destroying the images quite a bit. But I'm liking this kind of thing. What you might do though is lower the opacity a little bit just to kind of bring highlights a bit strong. So maybe that's something like that. Then play around with like the angle of this bit. You know, get it how you want. How do I want it? I'm just gonna drag it around forever while you watch. You get the idea, right? So that's my gradient overlay. Okay, we've used a linear one. You can use a radial one, which is just like a circle in the middle coming out. Okay, but I'm gonna use linear. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Okay, there's a few other layer styles that you can go through and practice with. And it is time for your homework. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is you've used the image here from Errol Ahmed. What I'd like you to do is either using your Envato Elements account, go find a new image, or if you don't have access to that, go to Unsplash and find your own image, find your own gradient, and I'd love to see what kind of combination you come up with. You can use the text that we've used here or go and adjust it maybe for your own personal brand or the company that you work for, and I'd like to see what you kind of come up with. You're allowed to just show and tell. You can ask for criticism if you like as well, and I will be kind and give you any pointers. You're allowed to use chisel embossers as well. I promise not to comment on them. Yeah, so do that and share it with us on social media. Remember Twitter, look for Tuts Plus Design, and I'm on Twitter as Dan Loves Adobe. On Instagram, I am Bring Your Own Laptop. Tag us in it, and yeah, we'll comment and we'd love to see what you do. All right, let's get into the next videos where we start looking at cropping and resizing images. Not as exciting as gradients, but very important. All right, let's go do that. Hi there, in this video we're gonna learn some basic cropping, but we're also gonna do some magic cropping where we take this image here, we want it to be landscape, and you can see here when I do the cropping, there's some edges here that just don't exist, they never existed in the world, but ready, steady, magic them up using the crop tool. All right, so let's go and learn how to do that now in Photoshop. All right, to get started, we're gonna open up all three of our images. Okay, a nice little trick just to add to our super fantastic Photoshop skills is I'm just using my source window. I'm in a Mac, so it's Finder, so I'm nothing to do with Photoshop. I can see Photoshop though. But look, watch if I click, hold, and drag all three of these guys, just anywhere in the middle here. Hey, they're all open. Click on Photoshop, and there's my tabs. That's a nice, easy way to get started. Let's start with this first one, 10A, and it's be on our crop tool. Now the crop tool is about the 5th tool down, exactly the 5th tool down. Grab it. Okay, and the basic use of the crop tool, just make sure at the top here you're on this one here, it says WH resolution. Like otherwise, if you've played with it before, it can cause problems. So just make sure you're on that option, and you can grab any of the corners and resize it. And you're ready, hit return, and that is cropping. Okay, I'm going to go to Edit, Undo, and give us a few extra skills. So back to the crop tool, you get these kind of dots on the outside. Now watch this, if I hover here, I can resize it. But if I hover just outside, can you see it goes from this like little straight arrow to bendy arrow? And I can click, hold, and drag. It's really strange. If you're like, man, this feels really weird. It is really weird. Photoshop decided this is the best way to do it. And it's just a nice way. Can you see my horizon line? It's actually perfect in this photograph. Okay, thank you, Annie. But you might want to adjust this one. Okay, so rotate it around, hit return, and now I've got this weird crop. You're less likely to be making it a weird crop and kind of fixing it up so it's straight, but know that you can rotate it that way. Now the next thing to do is, let's say we want it to be a specific size. I always find we go to File, New, make the document size you want, and then drag it into it. We did that in an earlier video when we started looking at text in this course. Go jump and do that one if you are interested in doing that method. Okay, but a different way is to do it within the image. Okay, so up the top here, there's some basic kind of presets. Let's say I want a kind of really traditional photograph size, okay? So 5 inches by 8. Click on it, and it gives me a little preview saying, yeah, I'm gonna have to trim off these areas to make that happen. The cool thing about that though is I'll hit return. I know it's perfectly gonna fit in, say it's an art print and it's going into a frame, okay, it's gonna fit in the 5 by 7. If you need a different ratio, you can just type in at the top here, okay, and if you need to flip it around, so you need it the other way around, click on this little option here, it goes from kind of portrait to landscape. If you need it to be a physical size, okay, you want it to be 200 millimeters or by 300 millimeters, you can go to this top option here, height and width. Okay, and you can say I'd like you to be, say, 300 centimeters. Okay, I should probably use millimeters, but it's giving me that particular ratio, dropping the top and bottom off a little. Okay, to get out of this, because I'm kind of wrecked it, you've got to hit escape twice on your keyboard. Okay, escape's in the top left. Okay, we'll get back out of there. We're going to also hit clear, because if you don't, the next time, say you don't crop anything for like 2 months, you come back in, it's going to remember those and it's going to confuse you. Okay, it's going to be trying to do stuff you're like, why are you doing this weird shape? The next thing we'll do will be our super mega amazing thing in Photoshop. Okay, I love this feature. So what we're going to do is I want it to be my 5x7. Okay, I'd like it to be, I'd like to flip it around so it's landscape. The trouble with it like this is that obviously the crop is a little wrong. So I'm going to click, hold and drag my image to kind of get it somewhere. And then you're like, it's not quite working. So I'm going to let go. Now I can drag these edges, and because it's locked into this ratio here, it's not going to kind of bend anyway. It's going to kind of resize nicely. Okay, so I'm going to get it to a point where like this, and then I'm going to try not to drag this little dot here, drag anywhere else. Okay, I'm going to get it to like, I want it to be like this. The only trouble with this kind of crop is that it was originally shot the other way around. So I need to landscape, and there's this extra gap here, just going to be blank, unless super magic. Okay, turn that on, a little underwhelming tick, but I'm ready for the magic. I'm gonna click the little plus button or return on your keyboard, give it a sec, get ready. Magic up the background. Cool, huh? Okay, it's done a little bit of weird stuff over here, okay, but it's measured up new table that side. It's pretty impressive. It doesn't work on all images all the time. We'll look at a couple of other examples, but it is pretty amazing, especially for this kind of like, I don't know, it's got a gradient in the background, some wood grain here. It's done a great job this side. Not so good this side, but still pretty amazing. Let's look at another example. So this is 10B. Now, the only trouble with our crop tool at the moment is that it's trying to do this thing. It remember. Let's go back to width, height, and rotation. Make sure it's cleared. I say width, height, and rotation, width, height, and resolution. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, and I don't want this kind of like traditional kind of photography side. What I want is, let's say I'm doing something for social media, and it's like I'm doing a banner for Facebook. Okay, that kind of big banner ad at the top there, or say you're doing, I do a lot of HTML banner ads, and they just got really weird sizes. Well, maybe a double page spread, you just need to make it wider. Something like this, I chose a sample example because it's gonna probably do well. Make sure content aware is ticked on. Let's click the plus button or hit return on your keyboard, and it just does a really nice way of duplicating the background. Cool, huh? This one did a perfect job because the background's quite simple. And what you'll find is nature is pretty good, because it can kind of mix it around and do its stuff, do it in a nice kind of organic way. Where it becomes quite troublesome is if there's like really linear lines. So let's have a look at this last example by Brooke. Okay, and let's do the same thing. I am going to grab my crop tool, make sure content aware is on. I'm going to drag it out. Okay, so I just want a bigger option. Okay, nice little square. Hit enter on my keyboard and give it a sec. And it's going to do an okay job. I've already practiced. But there's going to be a few things obvious. Okay, so hey, we've got 2 lemons. That's a bit weird. We've got 2 of these. Okay, the lines don't quite line up. This one's done okay. That bit looks good. Okay, so there are just times where this thing just doesn't work at all. It's done an okay job, but it's a little bit obvious for a few of these. Later on in the course, we'll do a bit more retouching. We'll show you how to fix it up. Once you've got to this stage, just to kind of get rid of double lemons. But yeah, I guess I want to show you with really cool examples like this guy. And this one here, did a pretty amazing job. And then to show you an example that doesn't always work. All right, so that is cropping. We did some rotating, and then we turned on content aware fill. You might want to turn this off before you finish this class, just so that it's not trying to do it all the time. Turn it off purposely. All right, my friends, we will see you in the next video. What are we doing in the next video? We're talking about resizing and resolution. Hi there, it's Real Me. I'm back again for this video because we're going to talk about resolution. Now, resolution can be a little bit difficult. I find it's a little easier when I wave my arms around for this one. So what we'll do is we'll go through some practical examples and cut back and forth to the computer to explain it. All right, so let's get started. First by opening up 2 images. It's 11A resolution from your exercise files. Okay, and these ones from Jonathan and Francisca, both of them. Okay, and what we're going to look at is kind of resolution gets kind of, we talk about high and low resolution. good quality, bad quality. So this first one, A, is good quality, high resolution, and this one here is low quality, bad resolution. It'll open up in your Photoshop quite small, and just hit Command plus on a Mac, Control plus on a PC to zoom in. You can see, we've all seen examples of this where it gets kind of all a bit pixelated. I'm gonna zoom out about there. Okay, there's just not enough resolution or density of pixels in it to make it look convincing. This bigger version here though has the exact same problem, okay? But the cool thing about it is the human eye and the human brain can't tell the difference between lots of little cubes and a real image. So what I mean, if I zoom in, okay, Command plus, Control plus, it's actually just made up of, if I get close enough, of tiny little cubes. But far enough away, my human brain can't tell the difference. So they get referred to often in, there's two kind of main sizes. There's 72 dots per inch versus 300 dots per inch, okay? And that's just kind of like quality levels. And let's say that most images that are born, okay, through a digital camera, or through stock library sites, are going to come at this 72 dots per inch. So let's check that. Let's go to image and let's go to image size. And we can check that this one is indeed 72 dots per inch. Okay, we also use pixels per inch, depends on which kind of realm you come from. PPI or DPI, people refer to them as, just the shortened version. Doesn't matter, they're interchangeable in this case. So this thing here is 72 dots per inch, and it is really big. You can see it is 72 inches across. So let's say we have been asked, we're going to get this image ready now for print, and the specifications have said we would like this document at 300 DPI or PPI. Okay, and we want it as the biggest size we can get. So what we do here is, let's say we've got our image, we need to send it off to the printer or send it to a newspaper. We're going to go to image size, and what we're going to do is we're going to make sure resample's off. Okay, when we're resizing original artwork, resample off is best to get started with. And let's turn the resolution to what they asked for, which is 300. And what you would have noticed is that you've noticed the size change. It went from like a really big 72 inches down to something quite small, 17. Okay, and we'll cut to some real life footage now when I'm gonna wave my arms around. All right, so here I am, my arm waving time. So what ends up happening, right, is you've got this document, it's 72 dots per inch, and it's really big, 72 inches, right, it's really big. Okay, so, but the requirement is 300, okay? So what that means is my 72 dots in an inch, say my inch is this big, and there's 72 little squares in there, okay? But the requirements are, I need 300 in there, not 72, I need more. What you do is you end up telling Photoshop, like, cram 300 in that same square instead of 72. And what it does is it says, well, there's all this stuff out here, I'm just gonna keep grabbing it and cramming more into that 1 inch. So instead of 72, I'm gonna grab some more, there's 100. Grab some more of them, come in here guys, and they pile them on and squeeze them all in, gets up to 200 and keep squeezing them in, and they pull them all in until there's 300 of them in that same inch instead of 72. And the cool thing about it is that now that one same inch has a lot more detail in it, and it looks really good for print. And that's what print needs. Our human brains can be convinced by a print, okay, that's at 300 dots in that inch. Anything less and you start going like, oh, I can start to see the little dots. Okay, so and anything more we don't need. Our little brains don't need any more than 300 dots in that little inch. You can go more. So that's why we need it. And what the trade-off is though, is because I've grabbed all those dots that were hanging out here and pulled them in, the physical size of the whole document got smaller, about a third smaller, okay? So we had to kind of cram them all in, but the drawback is the physical size gets smaller. And that's, I guess, just one of the trade-offs when you are working, especially with print, and you've been asked for 300 DPI, just know that whatever image you've got, it's going to be about a third. I know it's not perfectly a third, but yeah, it's about that. Okay, so the next thing to think about is, let's say I need it to be 300 DPI. Okay, so that job's finished. We're done with that one. We got it. It's a bit smaller. I think it's 17 inches across now at 300 DPI. Job done. Send it to that's as big as it can be at that resolution. But let's say there's a chance where, or there's a time where you're like, actually, it needs to be 300 and it has to be 18 inches across. You've just done that little calculation and Photoshop said it can't be. It can only be 17. You're like, What you can do is, remember that little checkbox? We'll go check it again in a second. That little checkbox that says resample, that's the thing where you tick that and you type in 300 and you force it to be 18, okay? And Photoshop will do its best. It'll just invent new pixels.
Okay, so it pulled in all the ones it needed, and then it goes, well, I still need some more. So I'm just gonna like start messing about with the file and start duplicating them and making more. And that's totally fine when you get to a certain kind of like a little extra half an inch, no problem, nobody's gonna notice, okay? But if you say I need it to be, I need it to be 50 inches across at 300, Photoshop's gonna try its best. It's probably gonna melt down trying to do this job, okay? But it's gonna look bad. It's gonna have all that yucky goop everywhere, and it's gonna try its best. But Photoshop's good, but not that good. Small changes, yeah, great. Turn resample on, increase it a little bit, fine. But if you try and do too much, you're gonna see all the junk. All right, let's jump back in and do it properly on the computer together.
Okay, so let's say it needs to be 18 inches. Oh man, it's just not big enough. You can turn this on and let Photoshop resample it. So I'm gonna force it to be 18. Okay, and what's going to happen is Photoshop is going to try its best to like magic up new pixels. They didn't exist before. It's going to do its best and magic them up. And with a small change like this, okay, we went from 17 to 18, you're not going to notice. Okay, it's when you're trying to do massive changes. If they're like, it needs to be 22. Okay, you're going to actually start to see, you can even see it in here. There's this kind of like goop that appears. Okay, this is resampling goop, and yeah, it just. Photoshop's trying its best to make up more pixels, but it can't go back in time and make a photograph. So that's kind of like small changes, nobody's gonna notice. Big changes, people are. That's probably one of the main use cases, okay, is when you take an image, you work on it in Photoshop, and it needs to go into a printed document. You might be sending it yourself into Illustrator or into InDesign, okay, and it needs to be 300 pixels per inch. So change it in here, see what size it is, and then go and you might turn resample on just to get a little bit more out of it. All right, let's look at one other use case to help you kind of understand resolution. Jump back to Dan's head.
All right, one other common use for using Photoshop to resize images is going out to kind of web or social media. And what that means is often they'll say something like, your image can be a maximum of 1600 pixels, okay? And it might be going to say Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and you just need to resize your image because at the moment it's quite big, okay? And you shot it on your DSLR or you downloaded it from the internet, that's really, really big. You need to get it to a more appropriate size for going out to social media. So let's go and do that now and resize it to about 1600.
Okay, so we need to get that right size. So let's go into image size, and what we're going to do is it needs to be 72 dots per inch, okay? They might not mention that. They just assume that if it's going up onto a website, okay, because that's the kind of standard website size. And this is where resample needs to be turned on. We made it bigger in the last thing. Okay, you can also make it smaller. Okay, so with resample on, I'm going to say it needs to be pixels, okay, and it needs to be 1600. Okay, I can't remember what I said, the talking head version. Let's say it was 1600. Okay, and I've kept the link locked there so that it changes the height and width. And now I know it's the perfect size. It's the 1600 across, the biggest they allow, and at the right resolution. I'm going to click OK. Okay, it's going to be a lot smaller, but that's right. That's what the website wanted. So that's what I've given them. Now I'm going to go and do a file, save. I'm going to save it as a JPEG and upload it to the website. Okay, so those are two, hopefully, examples of resolution. It can be a little bit of a rabbit hole of knowledge, but hopefully it gives you a kind of a brief understanding of some of the typical uses, getting images ready for print and getting them ready for a website. All about the resolution.
All right, that is the end of that brain-bending exercise. Let's get into something a little more exciting, back into Photoshop, learning things like masks and selections. All right, let's go do it now.
Hi there, in this video we are going to look at some basic selection techniques. We're going to create an Instagram post in this square format. We're going to use the rectangle marquee tool to bring in our cool coffee cup, and then the ellipse marquee tool, like a big circle, put space inside the coffee cup. All right, let's go and learn how to do that now in Photoshop. All right, to get started, let's go to File, New, and over here I'm going to kind of start with Photo. And then go and change it loads. Okay, so in here I'm going to switch it to pixels because Instagram, they've got a square format, right? And it's 600 by 600 at 72 dpi. Okay, that's their resolution. Now that's when this kind of video was made. I always make it double the size just in case, because Instagram seemed to suck in bigger size images but only display the smaller 600. But I guess when they decide we're going to display bigger images, we want them to have the higher quality ones. Okay, so we're going to go 1200 pixels by 1200, make sure RGB 72, click create. Now we're going to open up two images, file open, and in your source files, they are called, where are they, 12A and B. Okay, so these marquee ones. Thank you, Alexandra and the Norwood themes. So we're going to start with this image here, 12A. Grab the rectangle marquee tool, okay, click and hold down and make sure you've got the rectangle marquee tool. This is a nice simple one. You can draw out any sort of size you want, okay, and then we're gonna move it over to our image. Now, to get it to be a perfect square, what I'd like to do is go to select and go to deselect. It kind of gets rid of that selection. And who can guess what key I hold down on my keyboard? That's right, it's Shift. So I hold Shift down and kind of start anywhere up here. It gives me like a perfect square. It's gonna work for my Instagram. Okay, got it kind of cropped how I want. If it's not quite right, you see I can just hover in the middle of the selection and move it around. Okay, get it to where I want. And then all I'm gonna do is go back to my move tool. I'm gonna use the shortcut that we learned earlier. Remember the fun tab game? You can copy and paste it. I won't come find you, but we'll do it the proper way. Click and drag, back to this original image here, and then the mouse down the whole time and let it drop into here. So what we're gonna do now is practice our scaling. So we're gonna go to edit, and we're gonna go to transform, we're gonna go to scale, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. Okay, and I'm gonna grab the edge and I want it to come down proportionately. Okay, or scale down, we're gonna hold Shift. Okay, get it to kind of where I want, roughly there. Then I can kind of drag the middle. Don't drag this little thing, this little target. It's the kind of center of rotation. We don't need to mess with that. Just drag anywhere but there. And kind of get it in the middle. Okay, when you're ready, hit return or enter on your keyboard. Otherwise things don't work. So that's the rectangle marquee tool. Drag things in a big rectangle or square by holding Shift, and you can copy and paste things. Let's go to 12B and just look at the very similar, okay, ellipse. Okay, elliptical marquee tool. It's going to do exactly what you think it's going to do. Okay, I'm going to draw out an ellipse, and I'm going to go to select, deselect, and if I hold down Shift, it's going to be a perfect circle. I'm just going to kind of crop it there. Okay, we're going to put our space inside of our coffee cup. So again, move tool, drag to this first tab, holding down the mouse key the whole time, let go in the middle, too big, edit, transform, scale, corners, hold Shift, drag anywhere but the target, and we're just going to keep dragging it down until it's kind of in a, don't worry too much, the edges are a bit crisp, and we're going to learn more and more features as we go along. This is, I guess, just a quick and easy thing to do. Now, if you're finding it hard to move around because it's jumping around, I quite often just use my keys on my keyboard, okay, the arrows, so I'm just tapping the arrow key to the left, and up a little bit, zoom in. Okay, you can see the edges aren't perfect here. We'll look at doing a bit more of that later in the course. Okay, but just tapping around. When I'm ready, hit return, zoom out. Oh, awesome. Looking cool. Straight to Instagram. Okay, so that's using the marquee tools. Okay, the circle, the ellipse one, sorry, and the rectangle one. Nice and quick and easy. What I'd like you to do though is I'd love you to do your own version. Okay, find your own coffee cup or plate or bowl, something kind of looking from the top, and find your own image in the inside. Okay, one thing you might find is, I just happen to find an image that's a perfect circle. You might be on more of an angle. Okay, so you might do with this layer here selected, go to edit, transform and scale it. And you might have to kind of distort it a little bit to fit in with maybe, you know, the perspective of the image. Okay, I'm not going to, so I'm going to hit escape. It's my undo key. And because you've got probably got access to Envato elements, what I'd like you to do is, like, you don't have to pick, find a coffee cup in here as well. And I typed in, I come into elements here and I typed in photos and used Arial. Okay, I spelt it like Arial font to start with, but okay, but some of these images, if you type in Arial, you can find some stuff that you can work with for your example that's kind of looking straight down from the top, and yeah, find something interesting. Once you've got it, okay, find your own coffee cup, find your own Arial image, and see if you can combine them as practice. And then with your social media Instagram posts, is tag me on Instagram. Okay, so I am at bring your own laptop. I'd love to see what you did. You can also add it to that forum we mentioned at the beginning there. In Envato, you can look in the forums, and if you search for Adobe Photoshop for beginners, you'll find our little shared group where you can share the things that you've been making. If for some reason you don't have access to Elements, try using unsplash.com, okay, and find some images in there. All right, friends, let's get into the next video where we kind of do a bit of masking, but it's a cheap trick. Not a cheap trick, it is a good trick. Quick and easy. Let's look at how to do that next in Photoshop. Hi there, in this video we are going to use Photoshop to take this image and clip it inside a letter like this. Boom. Quick, super easy, all still editable. You can move things around, it's really cool. Let's go learn how to do it now. All right, to get started, open up the source files and open up the one called 13A clipping mask from Bale Murrow. To get started, grab the type tool, click once and type a letter. Okay, now mine's already a ginormous big serif letter because I practiced before the video. And obviously in my font size, you can see it's something ginormous, it's like 900. Weirdly, the font sizes only go to like 72, so yours might be as big as it can be at 72. You can either type in about 900, pick a font, or do what I do and just kind of click and drag to the right on this icon. So I'm clicking, holding my mouse and just dragging to the right, and you can see it goes up way past 72 until you get to kind of a size that you like. And I've decided about 900 something. I grab my move tool, get it into position. It doesn't matter what color it is at the moment, okay, because you saw at the beginning, the image is going to go inside. Now the way this works, it's mainly to do with the layer order. The image has to be on top of the D. It feels a bit weird, but that's the way it works. Now if I drag the background above the D, often it just says no. Okay, so what you can do is just give it a name. Okay, we've run into this problem before, it's locked, so just double click it, call it roses. Okay, and drag it just above, and we are ready to go. To make the magic happen, make sure roses is selected, it's this light gray, then go up to layer, and go to this one here, says create clipping mask. Ready, steady, cool, huh? Super easy, super quick, nice clean kind of mask. That's why it's in this section, and it works really good with these kind of simple shapes like type. So some of the things, so it's easy to get started. Now let's look at a couple of the interesting parts to this technique. Is I've got roses selected, so if I go to my move tool, move it around, you can see it moves independently of the D, which is really cool because it means I can kind of get it perfect how I want. I can also use the edit, transform, scale, and then I can kind of resize this to how I want it to be. Okay, get it in the right position, click return. It's the same for the D layer. Okay, if I click on this and move it around, okay, it's independent. There's going to be lots of times where you want to move them together. So what you can do is click on the first layer, hold shift down on your keyboard, and then click the second layer. They're both light gray now, okay, and I can move them both around, and I can both transform them at the same time, okay, just have them both selected. Now I'm going to go and add the white background and the drop shadow. You don't have to, you can skip on to the next video, but if you want to hang around, let's put a white background in. Why don't we have a white background now? It's because there's nothing there, it's kind of invisible, and Photoshop uses this checkerboard kind of effect to kind of try to represent invisibility. There's nothing there. Okay, but I want a solid white background and a drop shadow. So what I'm going to do is down here on my layers panel, I'm going to click on this little icon here. It's kind of if you hover above it long enough, it'll tell you it's the new layer button. Click on him. And instead of layer 1, I'm going to be real good and call it white background. And the easiest way to fill it with white is with it selected, go up to here to edit. There's a fill option. And from this drop down, yours is probably set to something else. Okay, I've set mine to white. Click OK, and we have a white background. Wow, we have white everywhere. But over here, remember with the bird looking over the top, the white background's too high. Click, hold, and drag it. Okay, so it's underneath everything. Next thing I want to do is add a drop shadow to my D. So I'm going to click on the D layer, and I'm going to go down to here to Effects. I'm going to go to Drop Shadow, and I'm going to mess about with this probably for 10 minutes while trying to figure out what kind of drop shadow I want. One thing you might have to do is the distance is going to be really small in the size because it remembers the last thing you did, and we're doing drop shadows on really small text. Okay, so first thing to do is just crank up the distance and the size, or not the size, sorry, the distance, make sure the opacity is high, so at least you can see your drop shadow. So if the distance is really small, you can mess around with these all you like, but you can't really tell what's going on, so crank it up, and yeah, go on to the next video while I mess around with this. All right, in the next video though, we are going to learn how to use the quick selection tool. It's pretty amazing to do selections with, so yeah, I'll see you over there. Hello there. In this video, we are going to do some selections using the quick selection tool. It's quick, it's really good, and it's going to allow us to cut out this image here and put it into our mixed background, kind of interacting with some type. It's quick, it's easy. Let's learn how to do it now in Photoshop. All right, to get started, let's open up two of the files from our downloaded source files. There's 14A and 14B. Thank you, Quino. Let's click open. All right, so we've got two tabs open. We're going to copy this and put it into this file here that I've made. So let's be on 14A. In an earlier tutorial, we used the really basic marquee selection tools. Now we're going to use the kind of probably the most universally useful one is the quick selection tool. So if you click and hold down, you might be using the magic wand tool, which is fine, but it's not as good as the quick selection tool. Let's grab him. Now just double check what your settings are at the top here. I'm going to be on the adding to the selection option, which is a little plus, or you can be on this first option. It doesn't matter, either of those two. And in terms of the brush size, okay, you can drag this up and down and decide on where you need to be. We're going to start with 50 and to show you how it works. Okay, 50 doesn't really matter. Let's just copy my settings there. Cool. And all we need to do is click hold and start dragging across. Now what you'll notice is I'm going to step back. I'm going to go to select, deselect. I don't kind of like start selecting the edge. You don't need to. It's a pretty clever tool. I'm going to just start dragging kind of like around the edge. And can you see the little dotted line? They're the marching ants, and they just help identify what we've got selected. So I'm just going to kind of drag around. You can see it just did a big launch across there. And it kind of just, it's so clever. It just starts thinking, oh, well, you've selected this, so you probably want a bit more of this. And it does, it jumps across. So, I'm going to now click over here and start dragging. Okay, you can see I can let go of my mouse, and I've got part of it selected. Sometimes it's a little bit hard. You're like, what have I got selected? What do I not? Okay, and the easiest way to do it is just kind of turn this option on and off. Okay, it's called quick mask mode. Just turn it on, and it just shows you, kind of masks everything out in red. Okay, so turn it on and off just to see. Don't double click it. Okay, so just turn it on and slowly turn it off. What I'm going to do is going to keep just dragging around, and you can see I'm not going anywhere near the edges. Pretty clever. The only thing it hasn't done is these little guys in the bottom here. Now I've picked a pretty good example for this, so when you're maybe using your own stuff, we're going to learn in some future videos a little bit of extra tricks to get some more tougher selections. But if it's a product shot or something like this, it's a really nice studio shot, it's going to be easy to select. So these bits here are not quite right. So I'm going to zoom in. So Command plus on my Mac, Control plus on a PC, spacebar, holding down my spacebar and dragging with my mouse. And you can see it's missed these bits, and there's a little bit of stuff in there. And yeah, the quick selection is quick. Okay, it's not going to be absolutely perfect, but it's pretty close. So what I want to do is minus from my selection. Okay, my brush is quite big, so it doesn't fit in there. So I'm going to lower the brush size, something quite small. Teeny tiny. And I'm going to click in here, so get rid of that. And you'll notice that when I start dragging, it goes and it looks horrible, and when I let go of my mouse, look, magic. If it's what you can do is this auto enhance option on. The only trouble with it, it does a better selection, which is cool, but it does stress your machine out. So get in there, and I've got a really pretty high powered laptop, and it does stress it out. Don't worry about getting too far into these edges in this example. Okay, we're going to do some more sophisticated selections later on. So I've kind of tidied that up using the minus. If I say I go too far, grab a bit of that, and it's like, oh no, it's gone too far. Go back to plus and just drag across that bit. Auto enhance, you can see, kind of stresses it out a little bit. Cool, so let's zoom out and let's see what we've got. If I missed anything, click on the quick selection tool, it's pretty good, go off. So now we're going to move it into this file here. We're going to use our technique where we just drag it. Okay, and one thing we might notice, let's do it first. Let's click, hold, and drag it. Okay, and drag it into this tab, wait, calm down. You'll notice that my one has not the most beautiful edge. Okay, so I'm gonna edit, step backwards till it's gone, come back here, and I'm just gonna kind of shrink the selection a little bit. We're gonna look at more sophisticated ways of doing this later on, so don't worry. I guess we're just kind of getting used to the tools. Quick selection is an awesome one. The edges aren't perfect, so we're gonna go select, modify, and we're gonna go to contract. And how many pixels? You'll have to experiment depending on your image. Okay, but I'm gonna go back maybe 3 pixels. 30, click OK. Now with my move tool, click, hold, and drag it, and it's going to be better. Not perfect, okay, but it's a quick solution for the quick mask, okay, and now I'm just going to go and kind of rejig this to show you what it looked like at the beginning, but if you're happy with that, you can move on to the next tutorial. That's the quick selection tool. But a quick caveat with that tool there, I've picked an image that works well with it. It's got nice, clear, defined edges. When we get into things like hair and out of focus objects, quick selection tool is not going to work. Okay, so it's one of your tools in your Photoshop toolkit, and we'll look at more advanced ones later on. But for studio shots and anything that has a clear, sharp edge, it's super quick. So what I want to do is I want to resize it. So I'm going to name my layer flower. My spelling is terrible. I spelled that flowerists when I first start with a U. I had to go back and reshoot this bit. So I'm going to use my selection tool, okay, or my move tool, move it around. I'm going to use my edit, transform, scale. I'm going to shrink it down, holding shift. This is stuff we already know, so if you want to skip along, it's okay. And I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to get it down to the size that I like. Hit return on my keyboard, edit, transform, rotate. Okay, click anywhere on the outside here and get this kind of, what I'm looking to do in this case is I want to do, rotate it around. I want this kind of Dublin to be behind and the florists to be above. So I've got it into where I want, hit return, and we're gonna play with a layer order. I love this kind of like real subtle interaction with the background where, and watch this, I'm gonna bring the flower in between these two guys here. That way the kind of D is partially obscured. You can still understand it's the word Dublin and florists is above. And for no reason other than to balance up the composition, I'm going to right click this, duplicate the flowers layer, and a flower too, like that. With my move tool, move them over. Now, instead of going to edit, transform, scale, rotate, we're going to use this one here, the free transform tool, which does both. Okay, so from now on, I'm just going to use the free transform tool. The Command T on a Mac or Control T on a PC is a really common shortcut to know. Okay, so if you're going to be learning any shortcuts, that's a good one. Because what it does is allows me to hold down shift and resize it. But at the exact same time is if I go move away from here, go to rotate, I can rotate it around once. If you're finding that tough, don't sweat it. You can go back in and just do it the long way. But I want to do it quickly. How balanced is it? It's not super balanced. I need to find another image and crop it out, but I'm not going to. Hit return, and that is going to be me for this tutorial. All right, so that's the quick selection tool. It is really amazing, but there's a few other things that we need to learn in terms of selections and masks before you're a pro. So join me in the next tutorial where we learn what a layer mask is. Hi there, in this video, we're gonna learn what a layer mask is. Basically, we're gonna take the same tutorial we did in the last video, but do it properly with something called a layer mask. The cool thing about them is you can turn them off later on. Disable them, bringing back the background, fixing your masks. And then we'll really double back and look at this option, and you can see we can fade the edges, we can break the link, we can move them around so that we've got more control, more professionalism, more awesome. Let's do that now in Photoshop. So what is this layer mask that I speak of? Okay, it's probably better just to go through and show you an example. You'll see all the perks and pros for using a layer mask. So I'm going to double back and use the exact same files as the last tutorial, so 14A and B. And we're going to get up to the point where we were at using the quick selection tool. Okay, and I'm just drawing around super quick, and I've got my selection, right? And what we did before is then use the move tool to just drag it in, okay? The problem with that is it's something called destructive editing. And what I'm deciding is that, watch this, if I move this out, I've cut that background out forever, and my selection is kind of fused forever, and there's no going back from that. And that's not what I want to do in Photoshop. I want to make a selection, maybe a quick selection like this, and then maybe go and fix it up later on, or make adjustments, or just have a bit of flexibility. To do that, you make your selection like we did here, and instead of dragging it, you just click this button down here. Okay, it says add a mask. Okay, and it's called a layer mask. And what happens is, ready, give it a click, and the background disappears. Okay, I need to go through and fix my edges, that's fine. There's a few little places that need touching up, but we'll do that in the next video. But what's happened is, can you see this layer structure over here? My image is protected, it's perfectly fine, there's nothing destroyed about it. This mask just sits over the top hiding things. And where that becomes really nice is that later on I can go and fix my mask or do a better edge on this, or reuse this image for something else where I don't need it to be masked. let's go and use it. So I'm going to grab my move tool, click, hold and drag up the top here using my technique. You can see we end up in the same place. We've got the same kind of edge here, but you can see over here the mask came along, which is lovely. And now I can do some modifications to the edge here, okay, whereas before I couldn't. So what I can do is see this down here in my layers. I'll toggle between the two. Can you see those lines that appear on the outside? Because you can work on the image or the mask separately. You can see your properties panel changes depending on what part you've got selected. I've got my layer mask selected, and it gives me options to play around with this mask. And real basic one is the feather. So watch this, I can crank up the feather and it just kind of feathers the out edges a little bit. Okay, so it wasn't so bitsy and yucky. Okay, it's because it's on a black background, it's gonna kind of let the background of the actual image through. And often this is all you need to do to get a selection looking nice, just give it a little bit of a feather. So let's look what else you can do with it. So I can right click on my mask and say just disable. I'm not turning it off forever. I can just see what was in the background there. It's not much because it was a black image in the background. But if there was other elements that maybe I cropped off that shouldn't have cropped off, I can just double check. Okay, so this is a very similar thing than what we did in the last video where we, kind of cropped it out, but now we can go back. Yeah, for layer masks. So whenever I'm looking at people's work and I'm seeing if they're kind of self-taught or using it like a professional, I'd be always looking for layer masks to give future self or other people in the business that open your PSD files the ability to go back and adjust your mask, either fix it or maybe just turn it off so they can use the image. I can turn it back on by right-clicking it and going enable layer mask, or I can delete it forever and get rid of it and maybe start again. So hopefully you can see the perks for a layer mask. What we'll do is we'll look at maybe another example that better shows its like amazingness. Okay, so we're gonna go back to files we had open before. Remember we did this one here. We did 12A and B. Remember we used the circle, it was these two, remember? We copied and pasted this in. So we're gonna do the exact same thing again, but just use our layer mask to give ourselves like some professional, awesome skills. So I'm gonna drag out my circle holding shift, get it there. And instead of just going to my move tool and dragging it out, cutting the background out, never to be used again, I'm gonna undo. And I'm just gonna click this button. So it's not much in terms of what you do, except you can see here, it's probably a better example where I've got this mask, this is black versus white, on top of my image, and the image is perfectly fine. Here's what's called non-destructive. Now we use my technique, grab the move tool, drag it into this one, down here. Okay, now I can go through and start scaling it. So remember, I'm gonna use my shortcuts from now on, Command T. Okay, I'm gonna scroll it down. Let's look at some of the other perks. I'm gonna hit return, so that's done. But remember the edge we had before, which was it was just really hard edged. Okay, so it didn't look really believable as much as a galaxy in a cup does. But remember the feather, just kind of feather the edge here. I'll go maximum feather so you can kind of see the edges there, but you can see I'll move it out so you can see it. It's got a blurry, feathery edge, and it just helps that to look slightly more believable. It gets better. Layer mask time, you can see at the moment it moves together, the mask and the image, but you can break that link. See this little linking icon here? Click on it. Okay, and now, remember I can click on my mask or my image. In this case, I want to leave my mask where it is because it's kind of in the right position for the coffee cup. If I grab my image now, move tool, look at that, how pro are we? Okay, we can get our composition right, or make adjustments that the client asked us, or you get the idea, right? So, in this class so far, we've been doing destructive editing, okay, by just copying and pasting it or dragging it. From now on though, you and me are going to use layer masks. Turn the link back on, because otherwise it's a bit funny having them separate. And now let's get into the next video where we start tidying up some of the less easy selections to make. We've been doing it easy so far. Let's make it hard, or at least harder. All right, see you in that video where we look at something called select and mask. Hello, in this tutorial, we're going to take some more complicated selections and masks. The most complicated of them all is here. That's a little out of focus in the background here. Okay, and using the power of Photoshop and its amazing select and mask feature, hey, we're gonna mask it out against a sunset background just because, using the underwhelmingly named select and mask feature. It's amazing. Let's go and do it now. All right, so we've got two files open. We've got 14A, which we've used before, and we're gonna open up this new one called 15. Okay, so grab both of those open and let's start with 14A. And we're going to build on some of the techniques we've already learned. So we are going to use our quick selection tool. We're going to use a brush size of, it doesn't really matter, okay, in this case, because it's such a clear division of color in the background. So I'm going to click hold and start dragging around. And we did this in the previous tutorial. So I've got most of it there, done an okay job. The only thing I need to fix up is just these bits in the middle here. So I'm going to zoom right in. I'm going to pick a smaller brush size. Now it's shortcut time, okay? We're not going through too many in this course because we are at the beginning kind of level, but there's some really useful shortcuts. Like, so look at your keyboard and you're looking at the P key, okay? And we are using the square brackets that's next to it, okay? So the open and close square brackets, give them a try and make your brush bigger and smaller. Instead of going up the top here and going, okay, now I need a smaller brush size and dragging it up and down. Okay, it's a nice way to get started. So I'm going to do something quite small and I want to minus from the selection. So I can go to minus here, okay, and just kind of remove that bit there. Give it a second, minus that bit there. Okay, even smaller, get this bit there. Yeah. I'm not going to spend too long now because that was for a different tutorial. Tidy that up. I say no, but I'm going to do it anyway. Zoom out and I've got my selection, and like we did in the previous tutorial, we're going to add a layer mask because that's non-destructive and awesome, and we're going to have something that has an okay edge. Okay, and we looked at doing feather, and feathers doesn't kind of work. What we want to do is maybe tuck it in a little bit. So what we're going to use is this magic thing here called select a mask. You can't see it. You might be on this thumbnail here, it doesn't appear. So I can click on my mask and then select a mask appears in my properties panel. Okay, so click on select a mask. They should call it like super amazing mega masking fixer thing. Okay, because it's got an insignificant name, select a mask, but it does some really amazing tricks. Okay, so yours might look like more like this. So we need to do a couple of things. The first thing is along the top here, we need to decide on, I think it defaults to onion skinning. We can check it against different backgrounds. Now this will depend on your actual image. Ours is white against black. So if I start masking and get against black, okay, it's just put a solid black background in there to kind of show me the edge. It doesn't show me it very well. Whereas white, I zoom in a little bit, you can see it's a really easy contrast against the edges here. So decide what works for you on black, on white. It might be on the layers, that might be one that works for you as well if you've got a layer underneath. So where does the magic happen? Magic happens is there's kind of two ways. If you go to edge detection, okay, and often you can just lift this up and it fixes a lot of things, okay? I'm gonna crank it up a little bit and I'll show you the preview on and off. It can stress your computer out a little bit. Now also note that we're not looking at high quality preview. You can turn this on, it just stresses your machine out even more trying to produce these previews. So if the machine is struggling, you can turn that off. I turn mine on, and what we're gonna do is look at the original. Okay, this one here that says show original, click that. So that's what it used to look like. Okay, and that's what it looks like now. So it's kind of softened that edge nicely. The shortcut for it is P, and I use it quite a bit. So just tap P on your keyboard to turn it on and off, on and off. It smoothed it out, but it hasn't perfected it. I find the magic potion often is down in here and under output, and this decontaminate colors. This works really well when there's a huge contrast between the background and the foreground that you're trying to mask out from, and the color kind of leaks around the outside. So if this was against blue, you'd have like a blue kind of halo around the outside, and that's often where the problems with selections are. So you can click on decontaminate colors and magic. Okay, so hit P on, P off. Now that's fixed this particular one really well. What we'll do is we'll open a more complicated example. We'll finish this one off first, but we'll get into a more complicated example. Okay, so there are other options. We'll go into global refinements. Now, this is work for this particular exercise. You might find you've got very similar flower against the background, but those two tricks didn't work. Don't think radius and decontaminate colors are the only things to do. Start playing around with smooth. Okay, so let's turn decontaminated colors off. And then you can see the smoothness just kind of tries to smooth out any kind of jagged lines that you might have got in your selection. Feather does what we did in the earlier example. Okay, I don't find that super helpful. Contrast shift edge. Shift edge is a handy one. Okay, just gonna watch this. If I go a little bit this way, you can see it's just tucking it in. So instead of decontaminating the colors, it's just kind of shifting the edge of this radius, minusing it a little bit. Okay, so kind of trimming off the edges. I find that is a reasonably useful one too. Okay, so there is a lot of experimentation with this tool, I guess is what I'm trying to get across. Okay, when you're finished, what we're going to do, I'm going to output to our layer mask. Okay, you can create a new layer from our selection. I'm just going to adjust the one I've already got and click OK. But what I should have done before I clicked OK, go back to select the mask, and the decontaminate colors is what did the magic for us. And I'm going to say, let's make a new layer with this new layer mask so I can see my old one versus my new one. So there's the new one, turn that off, turn my old one back on, pretty edge, turn that one off, that one on, nice edge. And let's go and look at a more complicated example, some hair, or this will work the same for, say, some grass or something that's really hard to select. So let's jump over here to the 15. So this one's a lot trickier. Where it's really hard to do selections is here, and out of focus here could be the hardest. So I'm going to show you a reasonably, hard thing to do. Is it going to be absolutely perfect using the selected mask? No, but it's going to get you most of the way there. It's pretty amazing. So what I've done for you for this particular file is I've got two layers. I've got the model on top of a background. We're going to try and match these two up. Okay, what they have to do with our florist, I'm not sure, but I wanted to do here because everyone's going to ask about it. I know it always happens in my classes. So with the layer selected, okay, I'm going to go back to my quick selection tool, pick a size. Okay, I'm going to start with 50 just because, and I'm just going to click and drag around to try and get most of it. Cool. So if you're playing along, yours is not going to be, depending on where you selected, okay, it's going to be slightly different result from where I'm at. Okay, but I've got a reasonably, it's a pretty cool selection, okay? And what I want to do is add a layer mask. And you're like, not very convincing, Dan. All right, so what we need to do now is click on my mask, go select the mask. And up the top here, we've got to decide against what background we want to see it. Now, you can see against white, against black is probably better in this case. Remember before it was white, so against black is nicer here. On layers could be quite useful as well, because sometimes you can get a bit carried away with like getting the most perfect mask when really it just needs to look good against here. So let's start with on black to make it clear for you. Now the radius is just not going to work in this case. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see kind of, because there's two like contrasting areas. There's this kind of out of focus here, but the nice strong crisp edge of the skin here. If I lift up the radius, it's going to try and, it's fixing the skin a bit, but it's kind of not doing a great job over here. So radius is not particularly going to work for me on this case. Now I can play along with global refinements. The problem is it's doing it globally, and I have these two really different kind of things going on. So I want to use some of these brush tools on the side here, and it's this one here that's going to do most of our work. It's called the Refine Edge Brush Tool. Okay, and basically it's a brush tool to say, Photoshop, have another go. Have another look at this particular area that I'm painting and see if you can fix it for me, like magic. I'm going to use a bigger brush size. Now, I'm cheating and using square brackets, okay? And you can use the slider up here to pick a different brush size, but to make it go bigger and smaller, have a look down your keyboard. It's a shortcut, okay? It's one of the really helpful ones when you're doing lots of masking. Next to your P key, just to the right of it, are square brackets. The opening and the closing, just tap them and see that it'll make your brush bigger and smaller. I find this is a real easy way to work. So what I'm going to do is make a nice big brush and say, Photoshop, please have a look at paint. I'm going to paint across this and have another look at this stuff. Give it a second to catch up. Okay, and it's gone through and tried to remask this part, not touching this. I might do this one. I'm going to grab a smaller brush and say, actually, have a look at this as well. I'm just painting along down here. Wow, it's hard to do. It's a very steady hand. You might zoom in and just do a nicer job. Okay, so it's kind of fixed. So you can kind of see I can work on different areas and kind of start using some of these edge detection features, but not globally, just particular parts. So I'm just going to work around and say, that was a bad go, have another go. This wasn't great. This wasn't great. This wasn't great. Moving around, give that another go. Let's put another go. Now remember we're doing against black, and it's not a, like it's very unforgiving. So it's a good way to get started, but don't get disheartened if you're like, man, this is never gonna look good. It's not perfect around the outsides yet. I'm gonna keep working around. Another go at that, please. That guy, that guy, that guy. All right, I'm going super fast. I should be changing my brush size a little bit more, but let's just have a little look against our background. So let's look against the layers. So this is kind of a more important kind of thing to look across. You can see some of the hair's coming through, which is cool. It's not as blobby, but there's a little bit of blue. Now, do you remember from the last thing we did where if there's color kind of leaking around the sides? I love this one here under output called decontaminate colors. And it kind of just tries to get rid of that stuff around the outside. And we're looking pretty magic now, right? I'm impressing myself, which I shouldn't because I've done this before, but I'm impressed with Photoshop. It's really cool, especially this selector mask. And you can see now I can just zoom in and just work on the parts that I find aren't quite working. So you have to change your brush size. It's going to go through and have another little look. Let's zoom out. Okay, see how convincing it is. I'm gonna probably have to go through and have a little look at doing a little bit more with the brush for these kind of bits that are still a little bit blue. But you can see if you've tried to do this in Photoshop before and like it's used to be impossible, okay? So selector mask has really kind of lifted that game for us. For things like here that are out of focus or trees and leaves that are kind of moving. So there is just times where it's just really hard. If you've got somebody with sandy blonde hair moving out of focus against the hay bale, selector mask is not going to be your super awesome selection trick. You need some sort of contrast. So if you're in charge of the photo shoot, make sure that there's some sort of contrast against your model or the product that you're shooting so that you can use tools like this later on in post. All right, I hope you have fun with it. I love it when it came out. Selector mask, you are awesome. Thank you, Photoshop. Let's get into the next tutorial where we start looking at smart objects. Hi there, in this video we're going to look at what a smart object is. A lot of people ask me, why should I be using them? They're on lots of forums, people say always use smart objects. Okay, we're gonna dive in, figure out the pros and cons for them right now in Photoshop. All right, so we're gonna look at the two parts. We're gonna look at smart objects for images, and then we'll look at it for things like logos and icons. They traditionally call vector objects. So, to get started, make sure you've got 16A open, okay? 16A smart objects from the source files. Now let's bring in an image. Now we're going to do it our way, file, open, okay? And let's open up the one called 16B, okay? Another image from Norwood Themes. Great, so we're gonna use our trick, move tool, click, hold, drag, drag, drag. We've done this before, we're getting pretty good at it, right? Okay, and we've got our image here. It's really big, okay, lots of quality in there, awesome. Now I want to scale it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the wrong way, well, the way we've been doing it, and then the new fancy way. So I'm going to grab my edit, transform, and scale. Remember, I'm going to use my shortcut, Command T. Zoom out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to scale it down to something more appropriate. And let's say I get it down to this size. For what reason? Mainly just to show you an example. Let's say I want to use it quite small. I'm going to remove the background. It's going to be this like little petite thing in here, okay? I click return, done. And then later on, I'm like, actually what I might do is make it bigger. So I'm going to use my shortcut again, Command T on a Mac, Control T on a PC. Now I'm going to make it nice and big. What you'll notice is, can you see the quality of this guy here? I want it nice and big in here, okay? Hit return, the quality just disappeared. Okay, and that's where the value of a smart object comes in. Okay, if you make it really small, Photoshop goes, okay, I'm gonna get rid of all the pixels I don't need, and when you make it bigger, they're just not there anymore, unless we use a smart object. So with this layer selected, I'm gonna delete them, okay, and we're gonna bring in the proper way. So, same technique, drag it across to this tab here, and before you do anything, right-click the layer where it says Layer 1, okay, and we're gonna convert to Smart Object. And nothing looks like it changes. Okay, the only thing that changes really is the icon here on the thumbnail that wasn't there before. You turn it off, turn it back on. Cool, so that is, basically all you need to do. You don't need to remember to do much, okay? But what happens now if I go to my transform, I can scale it down smaller, okay? Petite, I'm not sure why I use that word. Okay, oh, bad transform. Hold down Shift, Dan. Okay, hit return, it's really teeny tiny, zoom in, okay? But when I make it bigger, let's go, you can see all the quality is still there. Okay, so that's the kind of thing for smart objects. What it is think of it like a wrapper that goes around the outside. It's like a little cocoon. Now, it's a little cocoon that I put the image inside, okay, that protects it. So even though I make it smaller, it's in this kind of like protective shell. Inside that shell is the full quality image. Now your file size will be bigger, okay, because we've got the big version in there, but it means that it gives me lots of flexibility later on to do resizing, and it protects it from what's called destructive editing, things that'll wreck the image, okay? You can kind of do stuff to it, but inside is still the good version. What I'm gonna do now is do this with my layout order. Now, just so you know the structure of this, I made a rectangle using the rectangle tool. Where is he? Yeah. Okay, and then I added our color gradient overlay. We did this earlier in the course, right? I've got some text there as well. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at, so images are used that way, you know, that's the best way to use them. Let's look at, say, icons and logos. So let's bring it in, and you can bring in logos two different ways. I'll show you two different ways because, yeah, there's just some people, if you've already got Illustrator skills, what you're probably going to be doing is working in Illustrator. So I'm in Adobe Illustrator. You don't have to do this. You can just watch if you don't have Illustrator installed. I'm going to file open to my exercise files, and I'm going to open up this one here, 16C. Okay, it's my vector logo. And the cool thing about this, so Illustrator is really handy for drawing things like logos and icons, okay, better than Photoshop. But let's say it's been drawn in this program. What I can do is grab my black arrow, select it all, go to copy, okay, edit copy, jump back into Photoshop, okay, and then go edit paste. And here it defaults to pixels. And pixels is not the good way. We love smart objects, okay? Let's do the before and after. So I'm gonna bring in pixels and hit return, okay, to get it the right size. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna paste it again. So I've got two options. One is smart objects. Let's turn off add to my current library for the moment. It doesn't really matter. Let's click OK. I'm gonna hit return, get it the right size. So now I have two using both methods, okay? And the difference is going to be that same scaling thing there. So I'm going to zoom a little bit so you can see it. And they're both the same kind of quality at the moment. So this is my second one, that's the first one. Let's name them. Let's go no smart, not smart. This one here, and very smart. I'm gonna select both of them at the same time. Click the first one, hold shift, click the second one. I'm gonna use my shortcut for scaling. Remember, Command T on a Mac, Control T on a PC, and get ready for it. Let's zoom out, and let's make this thing very big. And I'm gonna hit return. You'll notice that the one on the left here, okay, let's have a little look. One on the left here is horrible. You've all seen that, okay? It's all pixelated and there's interpolation everywhere. See, this guy, Smart Object Man, is look how crispy he is. Or she. Probably a she. Okay, so that is the big difference. Okay, when you're bringing in logos or icons you've got from, say, your Envato Elements account, and it does give you the option. It says, would you like it to be a smart object? Yes. Smart object is the way to go. Why would you not use a smart object? There is a handful of, say, filters up here that just won't work if there is, like lens blur won't work if it's a smart object. Every new version of Photoshop, they seem to be able to include more and more of these features. So smart blur doesn't work on that, but let's look at the not smart object. Okay, and let's go to filter, blur, and lens blur is available. So that's one of the drawbacks. Okay, the other drawback, it makes the file size big. Let's say you did want to use lens blur. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of my not very smart layer. Let's say I'd like this though, and I'd like to kind of make it nice and big, but I want to add a lens blur to it. So it's not going to work until I convert it back into a not smart object. Okay, and what that's really called is if you right click the word very smart, there's one that says rasterize layer. Nothing's going to change, except now when I scale it up, it's not going to have make crisp quality. It will scale down just fine, but any bigger, it's not going to be able to redraw. So I don't want to do filter, just kind of an example, I guess. I'm going to go to edit, step backwards until my little icon appears. I'm going to show you one of the other perks for using a smart object, especially with things like logos and icons. So I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to shrink it down because it's meant to be kind of over here. My arrow keys just to tap it around on my keyboard. Let's make it white with this layer selected. We're going to use the effects and we'll use color overlay. And mine's already defaulted to white, which is cool. Click OK. So I've got that version, right? Now I want to use it in a kind of like a hero graphic way. So that big kind of thing you saw at the beginning, kind of covering the background. So I'm going to right click him. I'm going to duplicate him. I'm going to give him a name. Let's call him hero graphic. So I've got two of them now, kind of on top of each other. I'm going to scale this one up. And because it's a smart object, it's got all the lovely vector. Hit return when you're finished. I'm going to lower the opacity to kind of make it a more of a watermark thing in there. So where the perk is, I've got 2 versions of this now. And let's say that I'm still developing this logo or icon and I want to change it. There's a really cool, neat little trick you can do with smart objects. I can double click, let's say the very smart option, double click the thumbnail or this little icon, double click it. Now it's going to open up in the program that created it. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be Illustrator. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. What it does is, you see that original guy I copied across? Okay, it's the second version, like they're not connected. That original one I made and copied in doesn't have any sort of connection, so I'm just going to close it down. But this guy here that says Vector Smart Object, there's a total connection back to my Photoshop. What I can do is let's zoom in. Okay, I'm just going to do a real basic. Use my white arrow, click on this thing here, and I'm just going to drag the point, move the handles. I don't know what I'm doing. Breaking it. Okay, so I'm just adjusting this. Okay. Clients ask for changes or I just don't like it. When I hit save, so I'm gonna go to File, Save, jump back into Photoshop. You ready? Can you see? It got that little tab there. Okay, that's the little thing we made. Okay, there he is there. And there's the big tab there. So they're connected together. Okay, so it makes for like lots of changes, especially if you're doing say you've got lots of you use the logo a few different times, okay, it's all connected. Even if you're just using it once, it's nice to be able to go inside, make a change and see it update across different artwork. I am totally wrecking this thing now, just because. Nope. That is right. Save it, jump back in here, you can see I've wrecked my lid. Jump back in here, undo it. Save it, back into here, and it updates. So to recap, basically bring in an image, whatever size it is, convert it to a smart object, do your work. If you have to convert it into a non-smart object, okay, it's right-clicking it and rasterizing it. There are some extra perks for vector objects, okay, copying and pasting from, it works the same for InDesign or Illustrator, copying and pasting logos in. The other thing I'll quickly show you is, instead of copying and pasting from Illustrator, you can use this file, and this one here, it says Place Embedded. So click on this. I can do the same thing without having to open up Illustrator. You might not be that keen on that. You might not have any skills in Illustrator. So you can go straight to here, bring in your vector file, place, everything's perfect, click OK, and enter in your keyboard to get it the right size. And the cool thing about that is that Photoshop's clever enough to say, I'm just going to make him a smart object. So you don't really need to, I guess, make that decision at the beginning. You still have all the same perks, being able to double click it, go into it, and make adjustments, and go back in again, and have it update in Photoshop again. All right, smart objects, kind of confusing, easy with images. You're going to be in lots of images, so 100% smart objects all the time. All right, I think I just need to finish this video now, and we'll get on to the next one, where we look at some of the transform and warp tools. Pretty exciting, cool, fun Photoshop stuff. Let's jump into there now and get started. Hey there, in this video we're going to take this kind of flat graphic at the top right here and wrap it around our coffee cup and stick it under the book and kind of make it so it interacts with the background. You can kind of see it there, all using the magical transform tools in Photoshop. Let's get into it. Alright, so first up I've got 17A transform. Okay, it's from Raw Pixel on Unsplash. And let's bring in our logo that we're going to try and morph around here. So let's go to File, and let's go to Place Embedded. And we're going to start with this one here called 17B. We're going to use transform logo, 17B. Click on place. Yep, everything's perfect. Click OK. And then we're going to get it to the size we want. I'm happy how it comes in. I'm just going to hit return on my keyboard, enter. And remember from the last video when we talked about smart objects and we're like, Photoshop is awesome, and it converts it to a smart object automatically. In the very next video, that's going to cause us problems. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to learn some of these edit transform tools. You can do the basics while it's a smart object, like scale and rotate, which we've covered already, and we'll cover skew. I've never used skew. Okay, you might need skew. Okay, I'm gonna hit escape to say, no, I didn't mean that. So, not a smart object, it's not gonna work for us in this case. So we just right click the name and we go to this one that says rasterize layer. Okay, nothing changes except the icons go, and we get to do this. We get to go to edit, transform, and we're gonna start with distort. Okay, and it's just going to allow us to, it looks kind of similar as scale, but when you grab one of the corners, you'll notice it's a little bit squidgy. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do is I can click anywhere in the middle to move it. Don't use the little crosshairs in the middle, just anywhere else. And then I'm just going to kind of try and lay this thing down on the ground. There's just a lot of like tongue out going, does that look right? Does that look right? There's a lot of that, okay, when you're doing this technique. And I'm just trying to make it look like it's on the floor. Could be painful to watch. And I fiddle around the way just to make it feel like it's on. But, you give that a go. Okay, when you're finished though, remember it'll be all grayed out until you hit return on your keyboard or enter on your keyboard to say, yep, that's what I meant. Cool, so that is the distort transformation. There's a few other ones we'll just quickly discuss rather than go through. Under Edit, Transform, there is the option of flipping vertical and horizontal, just kind of flips it over. Okay, let's look at one of the other ones. Let's bring in another graphic. Let's go to File, let's go to Place Embedded. You could be copying and pasting from Photoshop, avoiding the smart object and using pixels in that case. Let's go down to 17C, just a square version that I made. Click OK. If you do get stuck in this kind of middle land, okay, it just means that, again, nothing's going to work. It's kind of saying, I'm bringing it in, but what size would you like it to be? I'm just going to say, enter on my keyboard, bring it in that size, please. Same problem as before. We're going to have to right-click them and go to Rasterize Layer. With my Move tool, I'm just going to move it into the middle here, and now I'm going to I want to kind of make it wrap around this coffee cup. Now there is a setting in here that I'll just quickly show you. Perspective. I never use perspective. Why? Because I just find I use warp. It does this, which is kind of cool. You might like this. This might work for you, but you can't kind of rotate it. And I find to do that effect that we did earlier, distort is a lot more flexible. Okay, you might like perspective. Have a play with it. I don't find it very useful at all. I'm gonna hit Escape. And what I do find super useful is under Edit, Transform, there's this one called Warp. So I use that one and that one quite a bit when I'm trying to fake things. Okay, so Distort was great for laying this guy down on the ground, and Warp, it works very similar, except it's more like fabric now. So I'm gonna zoom in. Across. And if I grab one of the corners here and just drag it around, can you see it's more like fabric, whereas this was kind of like, we were playing with a perspective, it was quite solid, whereas this, everything's kind of bendy. So the cool thing about this, there's pros and cons. And there are some default shapes up the top here. You can pick arc, okay, and you can pick lower arc, and there's some adjustments over here. And you might get lucky and like, you might just get the perfect one. So say this one here, the band, say it's a wine bottle and there's no, like at the moment there's a bit of a perspective here, it's not straight on. So you might decide that actually you can go negative. So say negative 50, maybe negative 20. Okay, and you can kind of get it, but there's this other kind of, I want it to be flaring out a little bit. So these custom ones, okay, are not going to be that useful, except for fish. Remember fish? Okay, we did this with type. You always need fish. There's never not occasion for fish. And if you want to get back to custom, it's this top one here. Okay, actually, I don't want to start with fish, so I'm going to hit Escape on my keyboard to get back to how it was and just start again. Edit, Transform, and let's go to Warp. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, again, just kind of a lot of playing around, going, oh yeah, there's a lot of dragging over. So, and what happens is there's kind of four main corners. So these kind of four corners, okay? And then there's these things, these handles that affect how it gets into these corners. So you need to play around with a bit of both. Okay, so you can just watch me. There's a lot of just trial and error practice in this case. Okay, out a bit further. And what I'm looking at is I'm just trying to mock up, trying to follow the edges here and follow the cup top and bottom. I need this to bulge out a little bit. This to kind of come out a little bit here. So we're doing quite a rigid object. And I use this technique for, say it's I'm mocking up an image on a billboard. So I've got a photo of a billboard and I've got my kind of like design that I've made for the billboard. It's a good way of kind of just, trying to stick it on there and fake it. I use this quite a bit when we do branding deals where we're trying to get sponsors' logos onto shirts and stuff. We want to mock it up. Okay. And another use, you might not be using this much, but I got a few tattoos, and what I do is when I'm designing them, I like to mock them up on my body in Photoshop where they would be colors, like look, just to kind of, bend them around, because you can get quite, you can see you can kind of follow the curves of the body with enough kind of prodding. There we go. I'm going to wreck mine now. Don't prod it too much. Okay, so you can like form this around the human body as well, which is quite cool. So I'm gonna try and get mine back to roughly where it was. You're getting the idea now that I've wrecked mine. It looked better before. Okay, so I'm gonna jump out now and pause the video and actually make it look half decent, like I had it before, and I'll be back. All right, and I'm back, and I spent a bit of time just kind of flaring it out, matching that. How long did it take? Oh, I don't know. I was at it for about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, trying to get the bulges right. There's no miracle potion for that. But the last thing we'll do before we go is the distorting and the warping is awesome. You need both of them in your toolkit, but I want to get this to interact with the background a little better because it's the same color across and it looks a little fake. So we're going to make it a little less fake by, let's find the right layer. It's this layer here. I turn the eye on and off to work out which layer I'm on. And at the top here, we're going to change the blending mode. We're not going to cover blending mode to hardcore. Now we're just going to look at switching it from normal to this magical one called multiply. And you can see it just interacts with the background a whole lot better. It's the way that this layer interacts with the things underneath. It's the same with this layer here. Click on my transform logo and I go into normal and multiply. You can see it just blends with the background. It changes the color a bit, but actually makes it feel a lot more realistic. The cool thing about it is if I click on this, I can move it around. Because it's interacting with the background, you can see it kind of starts looking pretty cool, huh? All right, so that's going to be it for our transforming. Let's jump into the next video where we start looking at photo retouching. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're going to look at my favorite tool in Photoshop. It's called the spot healing brush, and it's used a lot for retouching. We're going to do a couple of cool things like this. We'll remove some graffiti off the wall. Magic, huh? We're going to remove some blemishes of this man. See his face before, after. We're even going to go as far as removing people completely. Look, what do you mean? There he is. Look, there was a person there. Now it's gone. Cool, huh? Let's go learn how to use this fancy tool in Photoshop right now. All right, so let's open up our exercise files. File open, and there's going to be 3 that we're working with: 18A, B, and C. So we'll start with this one here. Now we're going to retouch out some of his blemishes and things. Now it's a bit, I worked as a retoucher for a long time, and I don't really like what we do. I love the technology though, so let's look at the technology. Not so much the faking life stuff. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna use this thing called the healing brush. Okay, so the spot healing brush is the top option. So click and hold down, we want this one here. Okay, and in terms of brush size, it will depend on your image. In this particular one, I'm using about, I'm guessing, about 50. Okay, so you can drop this down. I use my brackets there, remember from earlier? Okay, so brackets are really good for changing brush sizes. Doesn't matter if it's the healing brush or just a regular brush tool. So I've got my size at 50 and crank your hardness down to 0. So just drag it down to 0. Just gives a nice even edge. So when you're using it, there's a good way and a bad way. The bad way is just working straight on it. And I want to show you that first because it is pretty magic. Watch this. If I just click, hold my mouse, paint it out, I'm just dragging left and right, let go. Magic, huh? I'm going to go to edit, undo, 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 undo. It just magics away things. I can't believe how cool and amazing it is. Well done, Photoshop. But now you know when people say that person's being photoshopped, man, it's hard to tell. If you're a good retoucher, it's hard to tell. So one of the problems with that is that's called destructive editing. Like I can't go back now. What ends up happening is, watch, I'm going to paint out another one. You can just click once on some of these. Okay, depending on how big, you might have to adjust your brush size, but eventually you'll end up with this person that looks like quite fake. They look like they're photoshopped, kind of a plastic, weird skin. So what you do is I'm gonna go, there's an option under here called File Revert. That just gets it back to when I first opened the document, or at least last saved. Okay, so I'll go all the way to the beginning. So the more pro way of using that tool is to create a new layer down here. It's a blank layer, nothing on it. I'm gonna call it my retouch layer. And all I need to do is the same tool, but I need to do this one here that says sample all layers. So instead of like, it's just gonna look through to this layer underneath. Okay? And make sure if yours is not, it's set to content aware. It should be by default, it should be set to normal. Just copy what I've got. So now when I do it, same thing happens. Watch, I can kind of paint over these things, paint over, paint over. And you can work your way around. Okay, brush sizes, remember, is square brackets next to your P key, open and close. Okay, you can go through and you can start working it, but after a while, it starts looking a bit fake. I'm just so good that it's not fake. Okay, let's have a look now. Now, that person is, yeah, let's just talk about, let's say it is looking, starting to look a little fake or plasticky. Okay, what you can do is this layer, it's on its own layer, which is the perfect bit. It's what they call non-destructive, okay, because the background is fine. So what I can do is turn it on and off, on and off. It's really good for just seeing your work, okay? Okay, so your handiwork. And the other thing you can do is if it is starting to look a bit fake because you've just been at it for a long time, often with this retouch layer selected, just drag the opacity down a little bit. And what that does is it lets some of the background, it just makes this a little see-through. So you can start to see, watch it when I drag it right down, right up, right down, right up. You can just kind of find your balance of real life, kind of like maybe muting the marks and blemishes rather than turning them off. Because the problem with a lot of, I had a friend in, does casting for models, and the problem is their headshots, and she'll get people in and they're like, hey, you don't look like that person at all, really, because of all the retouching. So sometimes, it needs to be kind of a balance, I guess, softening some of the features or the wrinkles or the acne. Whatever it is, that's the technique. Make sure it's on its own layer, make sure sample all layers is in there. So let's get away from retouching people and let's look at one of the cool practical uses of, say, something like this. Now we've got our brick wall here and it's got, somebody needs more love, okay? And we want to remove it. Let's say it's just bad graffiti. That's good graffiti. We all need more love. So same technique here. We're going to make a new layer. We're going to use our spot healing brush and now we're going to find an appropriate brush size. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, and my 50 from last time is probably going to work. Now, when you're doing this, you just need to hold your mouse key down and paint. I'm holding down the mouse key the whole time and just give it a good work. Okay, and now let go, and it partially worked. Okay, so I'm going to paint him out as well, and we're getting there. Now, this wall is going to be pretty forgiving because of the brickwork. It's not it's so damaged. If this was a really even brick wall, this technique is going to be average at best. It's really good with nature. Okay, so some of the things down here, so you want to remove this glass bottle, whatever it is. Okay, it's really good. It's really hard to tell where it was. Okay, if you do find it's not working for you, you can go to edit, undo, and just try again. Often just the act of trying again will give you a different result. Okay, so you can keep working your way around. Okay, when you're practicing, keep working your way around. You get the sense of kind of how it works. You can see I lost that bit, but depends, I guess. It's pretty amazing though, right? If you had to go ahead, if you're an old school Photoshopper and you'd be like, clone tool stamp, forget the clone tool stamp. Wow, that was a good move. Okay, so you can kind of work these out. Let's look at this last option here, and it's really, really good for this kind of natural textures. Okay, so I'm zooming a little bit. My brush size, I'm gonna make it a bit bigger. You can see I can click on this. Actually, put it down. New layer, make sure it's sample all layers. I'm gonna just paint some of this stuff out. You can see, pretty magic, huh? Can't believe how good this tool is. And it works amazingly because of this rough texture. If it was perfectly some sort of checkerboard, it wouldn't work because there's too many repeating patterns. Now, where it doesn't work, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I grabbed this example, assuming that I couldn't mask out this person. I'm like, no way, it'll do badly. Then I went and made a big paintbrush and I painted her out. And then Photoshop did some magic. I have to wait a little while because it's doing its best. And then she just disappeared and I was like, yeah, not a good example. But there will be times where it just doesn't work. You'll try and do it and it will try its best, but it'll look like there's some sort of weird distortion going on in the world. So, and know that it does work really well. It's a great kind of starting point, at least. If it doesn't work perfectly, you can try and touch it up other ways. But I teach this all the time and I'm so impressed. These are new examples and I'm just like, man, how good is that tool? All right, so that's going to be it. Remember, it's on its own layer, so non-destructive, we can go back later on. But yeah, that is going to be the end for the spot healing brush in this exercise. We're going to look at the next tutorial where actually it's even more amazing. It's called Content Aware, so we'll do that next in the next video. Hi there, in this video we're going to look at something called Content Aware Fill. It is my second most favorite tool or feature in all of Photoshop. It allows to do fun things where I've got this extra space over here. This is the original image. I just need to magic up some background and pray presto. Let's look at another couple examples where this one here, actually the original is the smaller version, but the background got invented using Content Aware Scale. A couple more examples. That's the original. I tighten them all together in about 2 seconds using the same tool. Let's look at this last one here. got a really terrible format. Okay, it's a banner ad or a big letterbox image, and I need all this background in. Table got bigger, background got bigger. Let's learn how to do this now in Adobe Photoshop. All right, to get started, let's open up all of the 19 series that are in the source files. So there's 19A, B, C, and D. We're going to start with this one here called from Matt Quinn. Okay, this lovely macro photograph of a bee or a wasp, one of them. And the original photograph ends here, but we need it to be longer for, let's say it's when you end up loading up photographs on a double page spread, so like across the middle of a magazine, across 2 pages, there's always this like gap on the edge here because the formats don't match up in terms of sizes. So we just need to make it a bit bigger. Now we could try using the healing brush and clone tool stamp, and there's lots of options, but there's this magical tool. Remember my second favorite tool in this whole program? So first thing we need to do is to make sure on the right layer, it should be already layer 0, bad naming Dan, then go to our magic tool under edit and go to content aware scale. Okay, if I just use the regular scale transform that we have, I'm going to scale it out, and obviously it's not going to be particularly exciting, but if I use this one, get ready, edit, content aware scale, and start dragging it slowly this way, watch what happens. Magic, huh? The background gets bigger, but the bee/wasp and flower stay exactly the same. When you've got it to where you want, hit enter and dance around, because that is a super cool, useful tool to use. Okay, so let's say we're going to use this one here. Okay, now it's not going to work in every instance. If you're like, oh goodness, that is it, that's the only tool I need. Okay, it works. I've picked some images that work particularly well. It works really good when there's an object and some generic background. If this was cropped in really kind of like this, really small like this, it's not going to work very well. Okay, so it doesn't work at all. Give it a test. And we'll look at a few examples now and see how it works. So this one here, what we need to do for it to work is I need to go to edit and look, content aware scale doesn't work on this image here. So we're in 19B, we're looking at Catherine Hanlon's. So for this to work, we've run into this problem a couple of times. Remember the background, it's got a lock on it. So double click the word background, give it a name, Helen's. And what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I need to extend, because I want to make it, say, a Facebook profile, you know, the top of Facebook where you've got the big, call it like a letterbox kind of format where it's kind of wide. So I'm going to use my crop tool. Originally in this one here, I did this for you, okay? Remember we had it this size. Okay, so we'll do it together this time. So using the crop tool, you can see here, earlier we crop things down. You can actually crop things out, okay? So I'm cropping it out so that I've got this extra room here. I'm not going to go too hardcore. Hit return when you've got the crop right. With that same layer selected, edit, content aware scale, and then start dragging. You'll see our flowers somehow stay magically in their position, and the wall gets bigger. Just super cool. Okay, let's hit enter to confirm it. Now you might run into a problem here where crop tool, I'm going to click once, drag it up. So you want to make it bigger because you want to you need some room for text at the top here. The trouble with this one is that it's not going to work particularly well. So it doesn't work in all cases. So watch this, first dragging it up, the wall gets bigger, but eventually, can you see the pot's getting bigger? Okay, so there are times where it just doesn't quite work, but it's still pretty cool. Who knew what that vase looked like to start with? All right, let's look at some other instances. Let's look at 19C. So we've kind of expanded things out, and that's cool, but you can also, so back to my move tool, make sure double click this layer. This one here is Annie Spratt. We've got a couple from here. This one and the next one. Okay, and let's say that this placement's here. Well, I guess I want to show you an example where you can go edit, content aware scale. Instead of going out, which is super cool, watch this, you can go in. You see those bottom guys start moving in? Just magically the shadows start distorting, and watch this, I can tighten all these guys together to make a nice kind of a smaller group. Eventually it's going to start doing weird stuff. Okay, but you know, for slight adjustments like this, man, instead of trying to mask them all out and move them together, this is such a big kind of time saver. Can I shrink them down and spread them out? I can. Kind of reform this whole kind of composition here really quite easily. Hit return when you're finished. I'm gonna grab my move tool. My computer's gonna stress out. Okay, move tool, and here we go. We've got this kind of like a little bit of distortion there, but you get the idea, right? Now let's look at this last one and get a little bit more hardcore, because there are going to be times where everything looks perfect except for this one little thing. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to zoom out, use my crop tool. okay, because I want to do that letterbox again. I want it to be quite big-ish. I use this heaps when I do a lot of HTML banner ads, which are just really weird shapes. You know, that kind of really long, thin leaderboard or banner ad, or that skyscraper that's just really bad format. Okay, so reshaping images this way is perfect. So I've used the crop tool, make sure my name is not background. I'm gonna go to edit, transform. I'm gonna go to edit, content aware scale. There's gonna be a bit of a problem, look. You can see, and there's the paper. So everything else is pretty amazing, right? The desk just got bigger, the leaves stayed fine, the scissors are great, but it couldn't work out this thing, got a little lost in there. I'm gonna hit escape, say, I didn't mean that. And what we can do is we can protect bits of areas. So if you scale it out and it's not quite working, what you do is you grab any selection tool you like. Might be we've used the rectangle and elliptical marquee tool. I'm gonna use our favorite, the quick selection tool. And I'm just gonna kind of draw a box in there, and it's super quick and easy. Just kind of runs out and grabs the edges of this, which is perfect. And I'm gonna go to select, save selection. Okay, so we need to do this step first. So we make any selection we like, we figure out the bad bits, go to select, save selection, give the selection a name. I never do, you should. Okay, I'm gonna go to select, deselect, so I'm done with that now. You just make your selections, it could be multiple selections. In my case, it's just a little one. Now when I go to edit, content aware scale, okay, and there's an option up here that says protect. Drop that down, and it says a name. That's the thing I wrote, okay? And now, hopefully, it's gonna protect that little selection. Hit return. Oh my goodness, that is pretty amazing. I love it so much. Now we're doing pretty big examples here. We're dragging it quite far out to kind of show off a little bit. But you might be doing just smaller adjustments just to kind of make it a bit bigger or to fit your dimensions, okay? Drag it out, see if anything goes wrong. If something does go wrong, see if you can make a selection first, save that selection, then start dragging and use that protect feature. Now, another caveat for this one is that it's gonna work on like 40% of your images perfectly, okay, using the techniques we've learned there. There are some that just don't work. Really kind of confusing backgrounds where maybe it's a crop in really tight of an object or a person. It doesn't work very well. So there are times where it just doesn't work and it's never gonna work. But there are times where it's just a lifesaver, and half a day's worth of Photoshop work can be fixed with content aware scale. All right, let's get on to one of the last videos where we look at exporting for all the different kinds of formats, web, social, print. All right, I'll see you over there. Hey everyone, this video is all about exporting our files out of Photoshop. So we've done our work, we're finished, and now we need to do something with them. We'll cover how to send them to different Adobe applications, as well as sending them out to print and web and social media. So let's get started. So first up, open up our file. It's called 20 exporting.psd. Now, this is something we've worked on earlier, so you can have your version open if you like. So the first use case is, let's say I've designed this and I want to put it into something like InDesign, Adobe InDesign. And that's a desktop publishing app, so where I make my magazines and books and flyers and brochures. Now this technique is true for all of the Adobe software. It could be After Effects, it could be Premiere, it could be Illustrator. All they really want is, there's actually nothing to do when you export it. You just leave it as this PSD, this working file with all these layers. Exactly the same file you use in Photoshop. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm working on this document here in InDesign. I want to bring in my file, they use place in InDesign. I find in my source files, there's 20, open. I drag out my file, kind of cover this thing. Great, down. Cool. So that's my kind of banner that I've created, and you can see it just comes through, looks great, it'll print fine from InDesign. Okay, so if you need to incorporate a Photoshop document in any other Adobe product, just bring in the PSD. One of the perks for it though is if I go back into Photoshop, and in here, and I need to make some amends, so let's say this flower here, just kind of move it around to decide that it needs to be a bit higher, a bit there. The background, okay, I need to change, I'm gonna go to adjustments, there's an invert adjustment, okay, and it's just flip the colors around. All I need to do is file, save, jump back into InDesign, and in here, nothing really happens except here in my links panel, there's a little icon saying modified. Okay, I'm gonna click to update it. You can see it just went and updated. Okay, so it's a really quick and easy way to work within other Adobe products. It's just to use the PSD, and the cool thing is that when you edit the Photoshop document, it flows into other products. Now let's look at another use case where we want to go to print. So let's jump back into Photoshop. So here in Photoshop, I need to send this to a printer, okay? Either my home printer or email it to somebody to get commercially printed. It might be a flyer or a business card. And in this case, because there's text and maybe a logo, we're going to use the PDF format. Okay, so we'll do that one first, and then we'll look at maybe just using a kind of straight up image. So this one here, if I want to send this to the printer file, we use the save as instead of export. Okay, click on save as. There's an option in here. If you click on the word PSD, okay, or Photoshop, find the one that says Photoshop PDF. Okay, I'm going to put mine on my desktop. Okay, desktop even, and give it a name. I'm going to click save, click OK. There's a lot of warning dialogues when we're using this particular save method, because what we want to do is we want to turn this off. With that on, it's basically just a Photoshop file, and the file size is huge. Okay, we don't need that. We're sending it to the printer. We don't need them to have all the Photoshop kind of adjustment layers. We just want it to retain all the image, the transparencies, and any vector that we're working with, like the type. We've turned that off. And up the top here, just make sure you're on high quality print. Watch, if I go back to high quality print, it turns this back on. So I turn it off, and it's high quality print modified. If you see modified, don't sweat it. All it means is that you turn that off. You click save, and it freaks out and says, hey, normally, I think I've turned my warning off. It says, hey, you sure you want to turn those things off? You say, yes, I do. Cool. I'm going to close that down now, and let's have a look. Let's have a look at my desktop. There he is there. Here's my PDF. Okay, the cool thing about him is he's a real small file size compared to the original. The original that we opened was about 20 megabytes, and it still retains all the niceness, the good quality. Any type has really crisp edges, so that's a great way of sending stuff to the printer. Let's explore a different exporting use case. This is kind of more simple. We did the retouching earlier, and let's say now I need to send it to somebody to get printed. Okay, it's going to a photo lab to get printed on nice stock. They don't need a PDF. The PDF will work fine. What they'll probably be looking for is a JPEG. And let's look at using a print JPEG. You do it under File, Save As again. And there's lots of options in here for JPEG. What you want is just the standard JPEG, none of these other ones. Click on that. Let's stay on my desktop. I'm going to call this, it's not my desktop. I'm going to call this model. Okay, click save, and this is where I guess it's quite important. If you're sending this, we've done some retouching, it's a great photograph, we want to keep it as large as we can. Okay, we don't want to kind of drop any quality. Okay, you wouldn't, especially if you want, this is a commercial print, we want to make it look nice, keep the largest file size. Let's click OK. It's my desktop now, and now I've got my JPEG. Okay, how big is he? Let's check him. He's 2.7 megabytes. So still really small, but it will print really nicely. The difference between that and say the PSD we had before is there's no layers left of this one. You can see in my Photoshop document, okay, there's actually 2 layers. This JPEG is a flat pancake, but perfect for sending to the printer because they don't need to see your separate layers. They just want a kind of a nice, compact, small, good quality file to print. All right, the next use case is going out to either a website or social media, and the kind of same rules apply to both of them. It's about getting great quality image for the smallest file size because they need to upload, like especially for a website, we don't want to be waiting for your image to load. We want it to go super fast. So let's look at this first option here. And let's say I want to save this out for a banner for Facebook, title, or say it's an Instagram post. What I want to do is go to File, and in a slightly different place, it's under Export. And this one here, Export As is the magic one. Click on Export As. If you're using Save for Web, it works okay. Export As is better, in my opinion. Okay, so in this one here, because there's no transparency, by transparency, remember there's no like checkerboard in the background, there's no kind of like hole in the background. In this case, a JPEG is going to be the best. Okay, and the quality slider, when we exported the print version of a JPEG, we had to use a different way because it retains more detail that's used for printing. Because it's going to a website or to our social media account, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, we don't need that same level, so we use the Export As feature. And whereas before we had the quality jammed up as high as we can because we weren't worried about file size, in this case, it's basically as low as you can go. Can you go down to 2% quality? The way to know is if you zoom in, can you start to see it's starting to look pretty junky at 2%. The cool thing about it though is over here you can see it's actually 37 kilobytes. Okay, so it's teeny tiny. So best to check it at 100%. Okay, you can see even 100% you can see some of the interpolation or some of the pixels all glooping together. So how low should you go? Like my rough rule of thumb is between the low is 30 and high is 60. Okay, I find somewhere in there is my middle ground normally. There are exceptions. Let's try 30. Click out somewhere. Are you happy with 30? Zoom in a little bit. And this is totally up to you. You're like, what is it for? Type is going to kind of stand it out quite a bit. You're not going to notice too much in here. You can see it still looks pretty good even when I'm zoomed in. Okay, but things that have like crisp edges will stand out a little bit more. So I might decide actually I'm going to go up to 60. You can just drag this up and down by clicking here and just going up and down and deciding what you want. You can see the file size though is a lot bigger at 135 than it is at 30. So the trade-off, if you don't care about file size, go for the higher version. So for websites, file size is really important. For social media, not so much. Just leave it at 100%, it's fine if you're gonna just post it to your Twitter account. All right, once you've got it there, I'm gonna click export all, give it a name on my desktop, leave it as is, .jpg, hit save, and we're done. Now there are occasions where you spent ages getting a mask. Okay, I've turned off the background, the eyeball here. And remember we did these masks earlier? And we spent a lot of time doing it because we need transparency. Often you'll only need transparency if it's going out to a website. Not everyone's gonna need this, okay? But let's say we need to retain the see-through-ness of our image because on the website you can actually see through to the background, which is perfect. So all we need to do is just go to the same feature, File, Export, Save As. We just save it as a PNG. A JPEG you will see will fill in the checkerboard transparency with white because a JPEG just can't handle transparency. But a PNG magically can. Okay, so it'll leave that, even though it's got a checkerboard, it'll just be see-through. This might be cool if you're going out to say a video product and you want to keep the transparency, or in my case I do a lot of web stuff, so it just needs the transparency. Big trade-off is there's no quality slider, and over here you can see the file size is really big. If it wasn't so big, okay, and didn't have so much stuff going on in it, it would be a lot smaller, but yeah, that's how you get out a file for web that has transparency. Just click Save All, Save, and that's it. So hopefully that gives you, quickly go over it once more time. Okay, so normally just leave it as a PSD if you want to put it into another program, like InDesign or Illustrator or After Effects. But if you need to go to print, okay, typically you just be doing a JPEG, but you have to go to this file, save as JPEG. It's different from the JPEG in here. It has more quality for printing. If, like in this example, there's text involved or logos and vector and all sorts of stuff going on, it's probably better to save it as a PDF, and that's under the save. They like to mix them around, exporting sometimes, save as sometimes. The save as is the PDF. And the last was social media or websites, and it's just hiding under file, export, export as, and a JPEG if you don't have transparency, a PDF if you do. All right, friends, that is going to be the end of the exporting video. I will see you in the next one.
All right, you made it. It's the last video in the series, and we'll just talk about what to do from here. Okay, so first of all, I'd love to see what you've made. Okay, so if you go to the forums here and search for Adobe Photoshop for Beginners, you'll find what other people have done and share what you've done, and I'd like to see it. Okay, or you can share it on social media if you prefer. Okay, for Twitter, we are Tuts Plus Design, or I'm Dan Loves Adobe. Instagram, I'm Bring Your Own Laptop. So share it there. And then I guess working out what you do next is easy. The easy one is an advanced Photoshop tutorial. Okay, so there's a few of those here on Envato Touch Plus, so search for that. But then you might consider yourself like, I guess a bit more specialty. Okay, so if you're a photographer, the next steps for you might be more going into something called Camera Raw or Adobe's Lightroom. That might be your kind of next step for your learning kind of experience. If you are a web designer or a UI kind of interface designer, you might look to use, there's some courses here for Photoshop specifically for web and UI design. Okay, there's a few features that are specifically for you. You might check that out, or you might move into something like Experience Designer, Adobe XD. Okay, that's a really cool tool for prototyping websites and apps. You might be in the marketing field, communications, okay? You might find the next best course is something else, something like InDesign, which is desktop publishing, or Illustrator, which is more to do with like creating graphics and illustrations and icons and logos, that type of thing. Or another nice thing you might go check out if you're in that space is something called Adobe Spark. It's a really cool way for doing social media posts real super quick. Fix the photos in Photoshop and then add some graphics real quickly in Adobe Spark. So that is going to be us. We are done. We had a great time together. I hope you did. I did. And that's going to be the end of the course. I am going to finish. Hi there, my name is Dan Scott and I'm an Adobe certified instructor for Illustrator here at Envato Tuts Plus. And together, you and me are going to learn the basics of Adobe Illustrator. Now this course is for beginners. There is no need to have any previous knowledge in Adobe Illustrator or design or drawing or illustration. Okay, we're going to start right at the beginning and work our way through step by step. During this course, we're going to work through practical real-world projects together, learning the tips and techniques necessary to make each of those projects happen. We'll start with the techniques that you'll need to create just about anything in Illustrator, including custom shapes, the wonderful shape builder, and the simple to use curvature tool. We'll explore lines and brushes. You'll master how to use and manipulate type. We'll use our new type skills to make a print flyer. We'll work through how to create your own custom logos and icons. I'll show you the sneaky secrets Illustrator has to discover and use beautiful colors and gradients. You'll learn how to push, pull, cut, and manipulate artwork like this. We'll take our drawings and make repeatable patterns like this. And I'll easily show you how to redraw these images in this vector style. Last but not least, we'll make sure that you can save and export your print and web documents like a professional. Also, throughout the course, I set lots of class exercises so that you can practice all the tips and tricks and techniques you're learning as you move through the course. So if you've never opened up Illustrator or you have and you struggled a little bit with it, follow me and I will show you how to make beautiful artwork in Adobe Illustrator. Alright, to get started, what you need to do is you need to download the exercise file. So there'll be a link on this page for source files. So look for the source files. In there is everything that we work on together during the course. Plus it has all of the things that I set for you as class examples. So at the end of a lot of the videos, I kind of set some not homework, fun things to practice the skills you're learning. When you finish those practice lessons, not homework, I'd love to see them. So there's a couple of ways of sharing them. One is in the forum here on Envato Tuts Plus. So if you go to the forum and search for Adobe Illustrator for beginners, okay, and you'll be able to post your exercises in there. The other thing you can do is tag us in social media. So post your examples. On Twitter, we are two things. We are Tuts Plus Design. And also, personally, I am Dan Loves Adobe, so tag both of us. On Instagram, it's Bring Your Own Laptop. Okay, so yeah, share what you've done, share with the world, make sure you tag us so we can comment and look at it as well. The other thing to do is, or the next thing we need to do is we need to go through and just get our computers all looking the same. So yours looks like mine, and we're gonna reset the workspace and work on, make sure we've got the right units and increments and that sort of stuff to get started. So let's jump into the computer now and sort that out. First up, let's open up a file so that we can get our workspace similar. So your version of Illustrator looks the same as mine. Because the trouble sometimes with this first start screen here is it can be different for everybody. So let's go to File and let's go to Open. And what you want to do is you want to find the exercise files you've downloaded. Here they're here, exercise files, Illustrator. And in here, I want you to find the file called Getting Started and then click the Open button. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to reset our workspace just so that we're all looking the same. And we can do it along the top here. There's this little app bar, okay? And yours might say something different in here, but drop this down. And what you want to do is you want to click on Essentials. You want to see if there's a tick next to it. So click on it. And the second thing you want to do is come down to the exact same menu and go to Reset Essential. And that'll just put it back to kind of a default setting. Now, if yours still looks different, it might be that you're using an earlier version of Illustrator. And what that's going to mean for you is that you can continue along with this course. Say 90% of the course is going to be still fine for you. What you're going to have a little bit of trouble with is finding out where some of these menus are because they've moved around just a tiny bit.
What I mean by that, if I grab my type tool and I click and I start typing, you can see over here it automatically says here's my character panel and there's my font and font sizes. This properties panel did not exist in earlier versions of Illustrator. Super handy, I love it. But in earlier versions, what you're going to have to do is when I'm looking at this character panel or things in this appearance, what you're going to have to do is go up to Window and open them separately. This is how older versions worked. If I go down to Type, there's Character. Okay, so it's the same panel. Can you see? He matches him, but he's just in a separate little window. So that's going to be a fun game if you're using, say, CS6 or CS5. But don't worry, you can continue on with most of this course. So just make sure you've set to Essentials and that you've reset them. Next thing, let's look at the units and increments. Now to change the units you're using, what you need to do is have nothing selected. The best way to have nothing selected is grab your black arrow, the selection tool here, and just click off in this gray area here just so that nothing is selected. Watch when I select on something, this properties panel changes, but when I click on the background here into kind of like no man's land, it gives me general overall settings for the document. In this case, it's currently set to centimeters. Okay, I'm going to change mine and work in inches in this course. But let's say we're working, say, with some web or UI design work in Illustrator. You can click on pixels. It doesn't really matter, but this is the place to change it. It's in a slightly different place than, say, a lot of the other Adobe products like Photoshop or InDesign where it's kind of done in the preferences. So that's just something to note here. I'm going to pick inches. One last thing we'll do before we move on to start making things is just some basic navigation. We'll cover a lot more during the course, but zooming in and out and moving around is quite important. So there is a long way. You can use this, see this little magnifying glass here, the zoom tool, click on that and you click once, click twice, okay, and just keep zooming in. To zoom out, you can hold down the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC. So to look down your keyboard, if you're using a Mac, it's the Option key. If you're a PC, it's the Alt key. You can see the little icon changes from a plus to a minus, and then I just click again with my left mouse button. Okay, and it just zooms out. So that's the long way. What you'll find is I'm not going to cover too many shortcuts really early on, but the one everyone uses to zoom in and out is on a Mac, hold down your Command key and tap plus. If you're on a PC, hold down the Control key and tap plus. Okay, so plus is just up in your numbers, kind of along the top of your keyboard, there's a plus and a minus. So minus zooms out, plus zooms in. One last little bit of navigation is to move around. Say I want to see kind of down a bit further. See these little sliders on the side here? Okay, it'll look a little different on a PC, but there'll be a little kind of a slider bar that you can go up and down. Same with down the bottom here, you can go left and right. Okay, that is the long, painful way. That is fine when you're new, you can do that way. But let's do one last little shortcut is if you hold down the space bar, can you see at the moment I'm on my selection tool? Okay, but if I hold space bar down, look at the icon that changes, it becomes a little hand. Okay, so space bar down becomes a little hand, and that just means click, hold, and drag. Okay, so space bar down, clicking the mouse, and just dragging it around. All right, that's it for the boring navigation stuff in Illustrator. I will remind you of those shortcuts throughout the course, so don't worry. But now, boring stuff over, let's get into the super exciting world of creating things in Illustrator using shapes and lines. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Hi there, in this video we are going to set up our documents so that we can start redrawing this cute little sheriff penguin using all our shapes. So we're going to create a new document, show you how to bring in and use layers to lock this pencil drawing in the background so that we can redraw over the top of it. All right, let's get started. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new document to draw our penguin on. Let's go to File, let's go to New. Now in here we've got a bunch of presets. Okay, along the top here you've got, like if you want to design a mobile phone, kind of website, we're going to start with print. Okay, and in here we're going to pick letter, and along here we're going to change our units to inches. We're going to make it landscape, and what you'll find is yours is probably twirled up down the bottom here. See where it says advanced options? Click on that word, and this little extra option opens up. Okay, and we'll change our color mode to RGB. And we're not going to cover the full differences between RGB and CMYK, but just so you know, if you're new, RGB gives you a bigger color field, okay, more richer colors. CMYK is a little bit more washed out. But if you're going to eventually become a commercial illustrator or commercial designer using Illustrator, you probably need to research a little bit more the differences between the two. But the short version is just use RGB. Even if you're going to commercial print, printers have some amazing software to convert it to RGB, which they need, and often it can give you a better result. So RGB, perfect for pretty much all circumstances these days. Let's click Create. All right, next thing we're going to do is save our document. So next up, let's go to File and let's save our document. And what I want to do is, now if you're on a Mac like I am, okay, you might have to click this little arrow to see a few more of the options here. Okay, if you're on a PC, things are very similar but a little different. Okay, now depending on your ability, you might just save it onto your desktop and just leave it at that. What I'm going to do is be very organized and click on new folder. I'm going to put it into here called class files. Okay, I'm going to put a folder on my desktop called class files. I'm going to call this my penguin. I'm not even sure if that's how you spell penguin. Looks good enough for me. If you're on a PC, it's slightly different. I think there's just an icon along the top here that says like new folder. Hover above them. Create a new folder called class files. Name our document penguin. And let's click save. Okay, these Illustrator options, just leave them all by default and click OK. So to get started, what we've got is I've hand drawn our penguin, and we're going to redraw over the top of it. And it's a really common way that I work and a lot of illustrators work, is that it's easier to draw on my notebook, take a photo of it or a scan, and actually just draw over the top of it in Illustrator. It's not how everyone works. You can go straight into Illustrator, but it's going to give us at least a template to draw over the top of, just to make it a bit easier for us now. So to make that happen, let's go to File, and let's go to Place. Place is the word, it's interchangeable with import. Illustrator likes to call it place though. So File, Place, bring in our image. Let's find the exercise files that you've downloaded, and in there should be one called penguin.jpg. Now before you click place, what we're going to do is click on this word template. I'll show you what it does. Let's make sure template is clicked. Let's click place. And what ends up happening is with my black arrow, if I click off in the background, can you see I can't move this image? So what it does is it brings it in, it puts it on its own layer, it locks that layer and dims it down a little bit so it's easier to draw over the top of. Now mine's put it in the middle of this document. Yours is probably off to the side here a little bit. So let's look at kind of unlocking that layer and moving it around. So up here in your layers panel, layer 1 is where we're going to do our drawing. This layer here called template, you can kind of see template penguin. What it's done is it's created a layer and it's locked it. Okay, so it means I can't move it around, which is super handy. But let's say I want to move it over a little bit. Let's click on the locking icon, click on this now. Now, okay, using my black arrow, just clicking and dragging the center anywhere. Okay, now it's unlocked. Okay. So hopefully you can see the benefits of using that template. I can lock it again now, go back to my layer 1, okay, make sure it is highlighted and I can do my drawing on that layer. And this helpful little layer is just underneath, dimmed down a little bit, the opacity is down a little bit, and it's locked, making it easy to draw. All right, so that's it for setting up our document, just getting it ready for drawing over the top of. What we'll do in the next video is that we'll start drawing with our shapes, okay, lines and rectangles to make our cute little penguin that for some unknown reason is a sheriff, mainly because I needed to show you how to draw stuff. But let's do that in the next video. Hi there, in this video we are going to redraw this pencil penguin, okay, over the top using shapes and lines, using Illustrator, turn them off, and yeah, our short little squat penguin. Look how happy he is. Alright, let's get started. Alright, to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our rectangle tool over here in my toolbar. If you can't see the rectangle tool, it might be that if you click and hold this kind of where this option might be, it might be set to something like the ellipse tool. And to change it back to the rectangle tool, all you do is click, hold until these options appear. And then just click on the rectangle tool. And also to get started, just make sure you're on your layers panel and make sure you're on layer 1. In your properties panel, I want to make sure we're going to change our fill and stroke. The fill is the center color of our rectangle and the stroke is the line around the outside. So what you do is you click on this first little icon, doesn't matter what color it is currently, pick a random color, okay? And because we're going to change it in a second, but I just wanted you to get used to it. You can click back on this icon to close it back up, and in the stroke, click on this, just make sure it's set to black. Then click, you don't actually have to click back on this, you can just click anywhere and it closes back down. And I want to make sure that the stroke is set to 1 point, okay? It's just a nice thin line that goes around the outside. So let's draw a random rectangle. Don't worry if it doesn't kind of line up. We're going to use it for the body of our penguin. So you can see the fill is the center color and the stroke is the line around the outside. What you might see is this kind of like faint blue line or a red line depending on your computer. What it means is it just means it's got it selected. So if we go about black arrow, this is your kind of like safety tool. Always go back to your black arrow if you're not too sure what to do. You know, you've got all these selected, just go back to the black arrow. It's the one you're going to use the most. And what you can do is click in the background here. So just click once and it deselected our rectangle. You can see the stroke around the outside a lot clearer. So it just goes blue when we have it selected. So what I'd like to do is I like to keep the black line, but not the fill. To do it, you have to have it selected. So black arrow, click it in the middle anywhere. And over here, click on fill, and to have none, see this little red line here? If you hover above it, it tells you, but that means I want nothing in there, please. I'm just going to Click in the background, close that little fill panel. Great, so I've got a line around the outside but no fill. And what you'll notice is it's a little bit different to select. So if I click in the background now, what happens is if I try and click the center, you can see it just doesn't work like it did when it was filled with green, because there is no center now. So if I want to select this rectangle now, I've got to click the edge once. So black arrow, click the edge and it should be selected. Now what I'd like to do is using these white squares, okay, I just want you to resize it, okay, so that it kind of matches the edges of our little penguin here. All right, not very exciting. Let's get into this slightly more exciting when we start looking at the corners. So black arrow, make sure the edge of it's selected. You see these little targets in the corners. These are called corner options. And all they do is click, hold, and drag it with your mouse. Just drag it towards the center of the rectangle. Cool, huh? So that's making all the corners nice and rounded. Okay, so that's kind of what I want. It's got the top but not the bottom. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this thing called edit. We're gonna use undo. It just goes back one step. Okay, undo to undo what you did. Okay, and it keeps going back. You can keep hitting undo right back to the beginning of the document. You can also redo it. Now I'm gonna use the shortcuts throughout this course because it's a really common thing to do, go to undo. And on my Mac, it's Command Z. On a PC, it should be Control Z. Okay, or you can just go up to that long way. What I'd like to do is, I would like to have just one of the corners selected. So look at this little icon here, take note of the color. If I click it once, you can see it's kind of changed, it's inverted. So it's kind of selected when the other ones are not. What I mean by that is if you click and drag that one now, okay, so you click it once and then click and drag it, you can see it just affects that one. I can do the same here, click him once, it goes to that alternate color. Now I click and drag him. Okay, I can kind of just work with these individual corners. Now my radius is a little bit different on both sides, so what I'd like to do is go to edit, undo again, so it's back to being a square, and I'm going to show you how to click both of them. So you select the first one, like we did before, just click it once with the black arrow. But if you hold your shift key down on your keyboard, shift key is going to play a pretty big part in Illustrator. Okay, so hold down shift, click on the second one, it means that I can select more than one at a time. So these guys at the bottom aren't selected, these guys at the top. If I grab one of them, click, hold, drag it, they both come along for the ride. Now I know they match. And a last minute change to my design, I'm going to click this bottom one once and just tuck it up. I want to have like a little bit of a penguin belly. He was a bit stumpy before, he's still stumpy. But anyway, you don't have to follow exactly. So we learned what fill and stroke is. Strokes around the outside, fills in the middle, and we'll look at these corner options. Let's start building some other parts. Let's draw the circle for his kind of eye there. Click, hold, keep holding down your mouse and then release on this ellipse tool. So with the ellipse tool, what we're going to do is click and drag over here. And what you'll notice is I can click and drag any sort of size. So that's fine. Can't have any sort of weird size. I'm going to undo a few times. What I'd like to do is I want it to be a perfect circle. Okay, that shift is a really kind of usable tool. So when I start dragging out, if I hold down the shift key while I'm doing it, you can see it locks the height and width. And that's true of rectangles or stars, polygons, circles. Okay, so I'm going to get it to roughly the right size. I'm going to grab my black arrow. I'm going to click either the edge, or if you can see this dot here, grab the dot. Okay, little center. If you've got it the wrong size, okay, say it's just still too big, and you try to line it up, and you're like, yeah, it's kind of close. Okay, what you can do is you can resize it. Just like we did before, is that I can grab any of these little guys in the corner. The trouble with resizing it this way is you can see I'm kind of distorting the shape. So what I want to do is before I do it, so I've undone a couple of times, is if I hold the shift key and grab any of the corners, doesn't matter which corner it is, okay, it will lock the height and width, like we did when we created the circle. Okay, so holding shift just kind of locks the height and width until I get to a rough size. Now my circle's not perfect, okay, so don't worry too much about it. Another thing you can do here is if you're finding that you're trying to line it up and it's like jumping all around, okay, get it close to where you want it. And then with your keyboard, so my black arrow, look down at your keyboard, you've got your up, down, left, right, your cursors. Okay, so I'm just using my cursor arrow keys just to kind of tap it around a little bit. Okay, a little bit left, a little bit up. That often can be a nicer way just to kind of do fine adjustments in Illustrator. All right, let's do this little upside down curve. Make some the happy, content penguin. Have you seen Pingu? Anyway, here's my inspiration for this one. So what we're gonna do is I could draw a curve. There's lots of ways of doing curves. There's this really easy way though, is if you click and hold down, so hold down the line segment tool, there's an arc tool, okay? So with the arc tool, just draw it anywhere out here. Doesn't really matter too much which way it goes because we can rotate it. So do it so it's kind of a nice curve-ish. And what I'd like to do is go back to my black arrow. Remember, this is our default go back to it tool. It does so many things. We used it to resize the circle a second ago. We can also use it to rotate. Now, what we need to do is we need to zoom in a little bit. So who remembers what the shortcut was? You remember, right? It's Command plus on a Mac or Control plus on a PC. So just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to show you why in a second. To rotate this thing, we need to be in a kind of a special zone. So when we were resizing it before, remember we held Shift and we dragged this up and down to make it kind of bigger and smaller? The rotation's very close. So clicking on the corner and dragging resizes it, but watch this. If I move my cursor just a bit further out into this kind of like, so too close? Nope. Perfect. Too far. Perfect. Too far. This is kind of like every corner has this kind of like rotation zone in it. And you'll wiggle your mouse around and hopefully find it. You're looking for that kind of bent arrow. And if you click, hold, and drag there, just click, hold, drag your mouse, it'll start moving it around. Okay, and you just kind of find it again, drag it around until it's kind of a curve that you could use for an eye. Now I want to move down a little bit. I could use these little sliders, they're fine. What's the shortcut? You remember, spacebar, click, hold, and drag. Okay, and just move it down. And mine's way too big, so I'm holding Shift. Just kind of rotating it around a bit. Don't worry if it's not the right perfect curve. We're gonna show you different ways of doing it in a second, but yeah, it's close enough. Drag it down in the corner. Using my arrow keys just to line it up perfectly. So to draw nice, good-looking curves, you can use the arc tool. You can rotate it by that little special area, kind of just outside the scaling part. Just out a bit further, that's rotation. Next thing we'll look at is we'll look at the stroke. This stroke, if I click off in the background, it's pretty thin. I want it to kind of be nice and thick in the inside here because it's a bit more of a design feature. So I'm going to select it once with my black arrow. And over here, okay, where it says stroke, I'm going to use this little up arrow. You can drop this down and pick one, or you can just use the up arrow just to click and pick a size. I'm going to pick 4 point. For no good reason, just looks thick enough. And that looks fine. I'm going to click off in the background and I've got this kind of like rainbow kind of shaped thing. What I'd like it to do is I'm going to eventually round all these corners, just the theme I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little trick. If you click on the stroke here, we're going to look at what's called capping. Capping is the end here. Can you see it's a straight line? I would like it to be like a little bulbous end. Okay, so I'm going to click on it once. Over here, our stroke, we don't have many options, right? We have color and we have the size of it. But if you click on the word stroke, ta-da, there's all sorts of nerdy stuff in there. Okay, so what we're going to do in this case is, it's called the capping. The unfortunately named butt cap. And then there's this second one, the round cap. Click on that. You'll keep a straight face, right? Butt cap. The second one, round cap's kind of what we want, right? It's kind of this nice, more gentle end on it. Okay, this one here, the last one, I don't use projecting cap, kind of just the butt cap versus projecting cap. You can kind of see what it does. It puts it like a square on the outside. I'm going to use a rounded cap. That can really help you later on when you're working with Illustrator and you've got some really like ugly edges or ends of strokes. Just switching them to rounded cap can like finish them off nicely. We'll look at stroke a little bit more in another video, but that's it for now. Let's click off in the background, click off. Happy, smiley, content penguin. All right, next up, we'll do some triangles. So I want to do the beak. I want to do the flipper, his wing, and his tail. So they're all kind of triangles with rounded edges. So to do a triangle is you hold down the ellipse tool or the rectangle tool, and you're going to move to this one called the polygon tool. So a triangle is essentially a polygon, just a three-sided one. By default, you're going to get a pentagon. I don't know. I'm not sure what that one is, but I'm going to delete it using my delete key on my keyboard. What I want to do is just click once instead of dragging out, and it gives you the polygon options. So I've got the polygon tool selected, and I just click once on my screen, and it gives you some options before you start drawing. And I'm going to pick 3 sides, please. Not going to worry about the radius for the moment. I'm going to resize it once I'm done. The 3 sides, click OK, and I get this kind of giant triangle. So first up, let's resize it and rotate it. So I'm going to use my black arrow, make sure it's selected by clicking the edge of it. I'm going to make sure it has no fill, make sure it has a black stroke, and I'm not too worried about the size of it just yet. So to resize it and rotate it, resizing, remember, is just grabbing this corner bit here and just getting it down to a size. Rotating it is that magical area around the outside. Now what you might want to do is, at the moment when you're rotating, it just kind of goes around in random degrees. If you hold Shift, remember that magical tool, okay, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and you start rotating it. You see it does it in 45-degree increments. You might want your nose to be that sort of shape. Clicking either the center or the edge, move it around, get it into position, resize it, rotate it around so you've got a nose. It doesn't have to be the same as my nose. I want mine to be flat on the bottom. So I'm going to try and rotate it using the magical rotation. Make sure it's big enough. Get it to overlap quite a bit in the back here. Okay, I'll show you why in a second. Arrow keys just to tab it down. Drag it so it overlaps a bit more. Why? Because I want to change the kind of a roundness in the end. Okay, so I'm going to grab this little corner option, the little target there, and drag it in. Make it a bit bigger. Drag the corner in. You can see it done to all sides. You could do our secret trick move where you click on it once and just do it individually, but it's a little bit easier just to hide these in here. We're going to make both the nose black and his little body black. So I want to reuse this. I'm going to have it selected. Okay, my back arrow, and go to edit, copy, edit, paste. Okay, and I'm going to put this down here. There you go. Messing about. That looks like a good flipper to me. Copy and paste it again. I am going to rotate it around. I just use Command C and Command V on a Mac. You can use Control C and Control V on a PC. There we go. Now you'll notice I'm trying to line it up down the bottom here. It does some clever stuff where it tries to like automatically line up. If yours is not doing that, it's called Smart Guides. Under View, and you can see my Smart Guides is turned on, got a little tick next to it. Okay, it just means it tries to line things up automatically for you, and that's super handy. It can also be a bit of a pain as well, so you can go to View and untick it if you're not liking all that jumping around lining up stuff. Some people don't. All right, the last thing I'm going to do is this body. I should have done it earlier, again when we had the rectangle tool, but I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to hover. You can kind of see it says path. That just means I'm going to start bang on the edge of his body here. It's really handy. It's one of those smart guides. Okay, I'm going to say click, hold, and drag. Get my rectangle. Don't worry too much about the stroke around the outside. Remember, black arrow. I'm going to grab this guy, click him once, drag him down to match. And same with this one. I'm going to click him and drag him up to match my. That's probably why I didn't do the little belly earlier on. I'm just adding more kind of things that could go wrong for us. So I'm going to try and line it up. Actually, I'm going to bring it. Oh, there you go. Perfect. That's why I didn't do it. So we've got the body. Let's do the feet as well. So I'm going to do the foot with the rectangle tool. Grab just that corner with my black arrow. I don't actually have to go to my black arrow. It's just a good habit to get into. Click on it once, drag it down. What I'm going to do is copy and paste them. So Command C, Command V, two of them. I'm trying to line them up. It's pretty good at lining them up depending on which corner you grab it. So you'll notice that if I grab the center here, it intersects. Nice. He's got two little feet at the bottom. All right, let's look at a couple of the other drawing tools. We're going to use just the regular old straight line, okay, the line segment tool. It's a fancy word, just drawing a line. And all you do is click, hold, and drag. Okay, click, hold, and drag. Those are two little, I'm not even sure what they are, little feathers out the back of his head, but what I'd like to do as well is change the width of this. Okay, I'm going to match maybe this. So I'm going to remember it was 4 point, I think we used for that, and we changed the capping. Okay, so what I want to do is do both at the same time. So what I'm going to do is go to edit, undo, until it was kind of back to the same shape it was. So like we did with the corner options, we can select more than one at a time, and it's that same key. So I have my black arrow, I have the first one selected, then I hold down shift and click in the middle of the second one. So I have both of them selected at the same time. Now over here in stroke, I'm going to say I'd like you to be 4 point, and under stroke, I'd like to change from that one to that one. All right, let's look at the last kind of new thing I want to show you. We'll draw that. We'll draw the rectangles and stuff for the water and the weeds, but this one here, why did he get a sheriff badge is it's only purely so I could show you how to draw a star and a polygon. Okay, you know how to draw a polygon probably. Okay, click, hold the rectangle tool. We saw it before, polygon. And it remembers the last setting. So the last time we used it, we said be 3 sides. So it's kind of defaulting to that now. So what we're going to do is remember just click once out here, put it back to what it was, which was 5 sides. Click OK, and we get our pentagon. I think. Pentagon? No. I want to lock in pentagon. Okay, and I magically got mine the right size. If you don't remember, grab the edges here, hold down shift while you're dragging those edges. It will lock the height and width. Just kind of move it in by grabbing the edges. Okay, we go. If it's the wrong fill and the wrong stroke with it selected, you can go and change the fill to none and the stroke there. Let's do our star. So the star is there's an actual star tool. So click and hold down this little kind of shape group and grab the star tool. And if you click, hold, and drag out, you'll get just a regular star. To adjust the star, I'm going to undo it, click once, and you can decide on how many points it has and how pointy they are. Just mess around with the different radiuses to experiment with it. It's hard to describe. Mine one's fine the way it was. I'm going to leave everything by itself. I'm going to cancel and just draw a star. Now to lock it into like a perfect kind of horizontal and vertical, hold shift with that magical tool. When in doubt, probably hold down shift. Grab the black arrow, click, hold, and drag, get close, shift, on the corners, drag it out. You're getting good at this, right? All right, what I'd like to do is make sure that it will try its very best to align these perfectly. Okay, if you're like, I know it's not aligned perfectly, so what you can do is select both of them. Remember our trick? Have the star selected. Which key do you hold down? That's right, shift key. Click the center of this pentagon. And what you'll see over the side here is that you've got your align options. So I want to make sure they're aligned horizontally center and vertically center. And they are perfect already. I'm going to move mine off. Hold shift, grab both of them just to show you what it actually does. They are perfectly centered, so I'm just going to kind of move mine way off so it makes it a bit more clearer what we're doing. So I'm going to make sure it's horizontally center and vertically center. I can never remember which is which, so I just click both. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it. I've got them both selected. And I'm going to hold down shift key. I want them to be a lot smaller. So spacebar to move along. Grab one of the edges. And shift to get it to a kind of a sheriff badge size. All right, last couple of things we're going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can put in, that is meant to be the ground and that's meant to be the water. You weren't sure. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and I'm going to get close to this edge and it's going to go. It happens all the time where you kind of just get close to it and Illustrator kind of, you get lost this way. So I've got this giant rectangle. To get back, okay, we can go to view and just go to the one that says fit all in window. Kind of gets you back to home base. Command 0 on your keyboard, okay, on a Mac, or Control 0 on your keyboard is a really common shortcut to do the same thing. Otherwise, just go to view and go to the one that says fit up or to window or fit all to window. Okay, we'll get back to here. I'm going to delete with my keyboard. We'll go to undo to get rid of the giant rectangle. And I'm going to draw one that kind of goes just to the edges here. Another one. And I'm going to draw in my circles. And I'm going to cheat a little bit with the circles. I'm going to draw a circle. Zoom in a little bit. I'm going to copy and paste it instead of drawing lots of them. And resize them. It's not even cheating. It takes just as long. Maybe even just easier to draw. Holding shift maybe to get a perfect circle. Yeah, okay, that first way. Yeah. All right, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some color. Well, actually, forgot the tuft of grass. I'm just gonna use the arc tool. There you go, arc tool. Gonna be a bit of rotation going on. So, maybe not. That'll do. Beautiful. All right, we're gonna come back and look at strokes in a bit more detail to maybe give these a little bit more prettiness, but for the moment, that's gonna do it. What I'd like to do is add some fill colors, because at the moment these, I don't know, weird shapes and sizes, so we're gonna have to work our way through, adding fills, messing with strokes, resizing strokes, grouping, arranging, and we'll do all of that in the very next video. All right, I'll see you then. Hi there, this video we're going to take our drawing from the last video and do this to them. We're going to color them in, but along the way we're going to learn how to use grouping, arranging, what isolation mode is, all sorts of fun stuff. Let's get started. Alright, let's look at grouping, arranging, we're also going to color them in. That sounds real simple, hang around because there's things like isolation mode that you really need to understand before moving on. Alright, so first up, let's turn off our trace layer. Okay, it was useful for getting us here, but we don't need it anymore. So under your layers panel, let's just turn the eyeball off. Okay, or this like little icon here, the first icon in the layers panel, we don't need it anymore. You can click on it and hit the trash can way down the bottom here. Okay, and that'll just get rid of it. I'm just gonna leave mine there, I'm gonna undo. Just turn it off. So let's first of all look at grouping and then isolation mode. So I'm zooming in. I want to do a couple of things. I want to grab my pentagon and I want to give it a black fill. So I'm going to click on fill, make it black, give the stroke a none color. We have a small problem as in our star. You can see if I use my black arrow, I can just hover above and eventually find my star by just clicking the little blue line that appears. It's there, but because it's black on black and it has no center, it can't be seen. So let's have a look at fixing that. So stroke, I don't want any stroke on it. And the fill, I would like this option here for white. Cool. So I want to group these two. So I need to select both of them. So I'm going to click sometimes you can't click both. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. It makes it a little easier to click individual items when they're really close. So I've clicked on my pentagon, okay, I'm going to hold shift and click on my star. So I've got them both selected. So what I want to do is group them so that they kind of stick together. Okay, so I can go up to object and go to this one that says group. There's at the top. All that means now is if I click off in the background and I click back on just either one of them, they're both kind of connected. It's not forever. Okay, I can go to select and go to ungroup and that will separate them up again. So that's how to group them. Grouping is handy. One thing you will run into is something called isolation mode, and this is where most people get lost in Illustrator. The people that I teach, quite a few of them are double clickers. They love double clicking stuff. So what happens is, I don't know, we know from lots of programs you gotta double click things, but if you double click things in Illustrator, everything goes wrong. Watch this, if I double click the star, double click. Okay, what happens is it's weird, the background grays out and I can still work on these guys, but I can't work on the background anymore. All that's happened is you've entered something called isolation mode. The way to really tell is up the top here, can you see this thing? This gray bar here didn't appear before. I'm gonna go back out of it by clicking this arrow twice. Okay, so I'm back out of it. Watch that, it'll appear up here. I'll move so it's easier to see. If I double click on this, this little bar appears. Everything else that's not in that group is kind of blanked out. Why do we have it? It's mainly to confuse everybody that I'm teaching, but it actually has a really good use. It means that when I'm back out of here, so I've got these things together, but I want to kind of move them. I want the star in a different position to the pentagon. So instead of going to ungroup and then moving around and then regrouping them, what you can do is just double clicking them and think of it as going inside that group. We've kind of dived inside. Everything else is grayed out. It's not important now. We're inside this group. Okay, now these guys are separate again. So I can go, actually, I want my star to be, I don't know why, but I want it down there. And what it means is I can click this arrow to go back to layer one and then all the way out to exit isolation mode. Just keep smashing away at that little arrow until it goes away. And now they're still a group, okay, but you are able to dive inside and change it. So I'm going to dive inside again, grab it, stick it back roughly in the middle. Roughly enough, I'm going to select both of them and arrange them. And again, you can keep clicking on the arrow to go back or double click the background. It kind of jumps you out like a bit of a quicker shortcut. So do you ever get lost and thinking like, man, that thing's not working, it's not locked, or from inside of here, you can see a lot of these things don't work. These menu items, they're all grayed out because we're in this kind of like special world isolation mode. Double click the background to come out. Everything will come back to normal. So if you're lost, click the arrow or double click the background and you can come out. Hopefully you can see the use of isolation mode. Let's look at another thing. So I'm going to work on both of these little feet here. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click the edges member of this foot. I'm going to click fill. I'm going to pick an orange just randomly from in here. And I'm going to have stroke of none. I'm going to pick this fella, this other foot. And I'm going to do the same thing. I need a slightly darker orange. Okay, and I'm going to have a stroke of none. Now the trouble is that this one that I want kind of at the back is in front of my front foot, just because I drew him last, okay? Whatever you draw ends up on top of the last things. So what I can do is I can select them, I can go to arrange, and I can go to send to back. And there you go. That's how to arrange things. We're going to do lots of arranging now to kind of get the layer order all right. You can use layers, but in Illustrator, unlike something like Photoshop, you generally only have one layer that you work on. You can have more, but because these are all kind of individual vector objects in Illustrator, it allows you just to kind of arrange them and bring them to the front. If you want this guy at the front now, I can click on arrange and say bring to the front, arrange, and send it back. One other really useful thing to know before we go through and start coloring this stuff is that, watch this, if I grab my penguin, I'm just grabbing all the penguin bits. Okay, so I've just dragged a box, instead of holding shift, okay, and shift clicking it all, that would work. Okay, it'll be there for a long time. What you can do with your black arrow is just click, hold, and drag a box kind of roughly around. Can you see I haven't covered the feet because I don't want that rectangle at the bottom, which is my ground. I'm going to go just above there, and because I've overlapped those last little objects, it should select them all. That's one way of doing it. What I'd like you to do is by default, I can't exactly remember whether it's on or off. I'm going to show you both ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this down. So I've got everything selected. I'm going to hold my shift so it scales it proportionally. Grab the corner. I'm going to scale him right down to be a teeny tiny version of my penguin. Something weird happens, right? Okay, all of the strokes they don't scale down proportionately. Okay, that is still like a nice solid, where's my eye in the middle here? Remember we made him 4 point? He's still 4 point. So I'm going to undo. So there's going to be times where you need that to scale down, where you want these strokes just to remain the exact size you told them to be. So to do that, let's click off in the background, but nothing selected. There's this option here that says Scale, Stroke, and Effects. Okay, so with nothing selected, you can turn it on and off. You'll be turning it on and off reasonably. For me, I turn it on and off quite often. Okay, so I've got it off. I'm going to drag and grab all of these guys. I'm going to shrink them right down. Be a little mini penguin. You see all the strokes came along for the right. Other than to see tiny penguin, I only wanted to show you that little technique, okay, before we move on. So I'm going to undo so he's back to his regular size. When would you want to use this? Let's say that you're drawing something that's a bit more, say you're a fashion designer and you need like a stitch, okay? You need to resize it, but you need that stitching detail to stay the same. Or say you're drawing, like I've taught urban planners, Illustrator gets used by lots of different people. Say this is a road, okay, and this is another road. Say these are not feathers, these are roads, okay? And I want to scale them up and down, but I want them to keep the same thickness to match everything else that's in my document. Okay, so I want to scale it up and down, but I want to retain the thickness. But most of the time, have nothing selected, just make sure it's on. That's, I bet you probably 70% of the time you're just going to need to leave it on. But no, that's where it is. When you want to scale it down, you can turn it off and it will keep its stroke size. All right, we're going to work through and color this fella using our newfound grouping arranging techniques. I'm going to click on the body. I'm going to say you, my friend, have got a fill, black, and a stroke of white. Actually, I might do him last because he kind of makes these a little bit harder to use. So I'm going to click on him. I'm going to hold shift and click on the eye because I want to do the same thing. I want them both to have a white center and no stroke, please. Awesome. I'm going to click on the body and I want the body to have a fill of white. And nope, I want it to have a fill of black and I'd like to have no stroke. Okay, so my alignment's actually working out fine except for my little flipper here. You can kind of see him. So it's a little bit hard to find that flipper. I can kind of roll around and I eventually find him, and that's actually probably just perfect. Click on him and I can say, you, my friend, have a fill of black, stroke of white, and I want to bring you to the front by going to arrange and say bring to front. Another way to do it, I'm going to undo, okay, so I can't see it right. There is a kind of a skeleton view you can use. It's called outline. If you go to view, go to this one that says outline, okay, it's a common thing to use, Command Y. Okay, or Control Y. Can you see it's just like a really wireframe version? So you can do things like actually click on him, because he's easy to see in this view. I can go to arrange, bring him to front, then go to view, and so you see Command Y toggles between GPU view, which is not a sexy way of calling it, but it's just toggles outline, GPU, outline, GPU. So I do that quite a bit. If I lose something, I'm like, I'm pretty sure there was a flipper here somewhere. I can just go to Command Y on my Mac or Control Y on my PC and just kind of select them. I'm going to grab you. I'm going to give him a no stroke. I want you to be the same. You are going to have no stroke and a black fill, a little beak. I'm going to grab you, who are nicely grouped. A little sheriff badge. Penguin. You notice I kind of did, I should have selected all of these in one go because they're all doing the same thing. I can do another little trick is, can you see this little eyedropper tool here? Okay, it's this eyedropper tool. So to make it work, I have this selected, okay, the outside of it, grab my eyedropper tool and then click on the middle of my beak here and it goes and steals the same setting. So it changes the fill and the stroke to match it. It's a handy little advanced one. All right, what I might do is I might grab this. It's gonna be a fill of some sort of gray thing here. And I'm gonna show you a few other color options. So gray, I'm not sure why it's gray. It's ice, or I just want a really monochromatic design. This edge of this for the water, what I'm gonna do is, say you've got these presets in here, okay? Just, these are pre-mixed, they're called swatches. Adobe has just said, these are the ones, these are some defaults, they're good. But say you want your own custom color. See this little icon here, color mixer? Okay, it gives you the option down the bottom for this thing here called the RGB spectrum. And it's just a little rainbow color thing. Click anywhere on it, and it's the tip of the little eyedropper will be the color. So you can pick any old color you like. color down. Come on. That's gonna work for me. Alright, I'm gonna get rid of the strokes on these guys. Stroke. And now I'm just messing around. You can skip through to the next video now. I'm gonna go through and color all of these, holding shift to grab them all. Yep. I'm gonna go fill the white. Now remember, if you want to go back to the swatches, click on this first one. I'm going to put in a little bit of a background color because I want to see my white belly a little bit better. So I'm going to put in, you can't change the background color, okay? You know it's white there, the page color. You can't just go and say set background color on, like you can on some programs. You actually have to draw a box. So rectangle tool, draw it all the way across, covering the whole thing. I'm going to give it a color of that really light gray. There we go. And I'm going to give it a stroke of none. I'm going to say arrange, send it back please. And it just means that you can see my little belly of my dude there. And if you're like me, I don't like his little pop belly now. I'm going to click on him, click on that guy once to get the corner, and just drag him back down so he's got a nice square belly. My feet in a little bit so you can kind of see that his feet at the side. Alright, so that's us for this video. We have created a little pop belly content penguin. What I'd like to do is set you a task now. Okay, so I'd like you to create your own creature. The boundaries are you have to use the tools we've learned in the last 3 videos. So just things like simple shapes like our triangles, pentagons, stars, rectangles. The corners you can use. I don't want you to use any of the other tools, just these simple tools we've used. The other thing is let's keep our animals. I'm going to give you some boundaries. We're going for ocean going animals. It could be in the sea or like our penguin kind of related to the sea. So pick another animal and it doesn't matter whether you hand draw it and then scan it in or whether you just draw it straight in Illustrator. It's up to you. Now remember this is your first drawing, so don't worry if you're like, isn't that good? I would love to see it. Okay, so if you take a screenshot or save this as a JPEG, if you're not sure how to save a JPEG, we'll do it later in the course. Okay, you look for a video called exporting from Illustrator. You can kind of sneak ahead to that one just so you can get the JPEG out, or just do a screenshot. And I'd love for you to upload and tag it to me in Twitter and Instagram. So on Twitter, I am Dan Loves Adobe. Also tag in Tuts Plus. Okay, so Envato Tuts Plus. They are Tuts Plus Design on Twitter. And on Instagram, I am Bring Your Own Laptop. Tag me in. I'd love to see what you did. So pause it now, go do that, and then I will see you in the next video where we start looking at something called the Shape Builder tool. All right, I'll see you there. Hello and welcome. This video is all about the Shape Builder tool. We're going to take the drawing we did earlier, this one, and do this to it. What do? Okay, we cast some shadows. Can you see? Before, after. We cast some shadows on the penguin, okay, using a real quick and easy tool using the Shape Builder. We also did some stuff with the eye there, where it's kind of a pie shape cut out of the circle. If you have tried Illustrator before and you've messed around with the Pathfinder and thought it was really tough, this is a replacement for it. It is awesome. You'll love it. Spent far too much time hyping this up. Let's just jump in and learn how it works. All right, to get started, let's go to File. Let's go to Open, and in your exercise files, there's one called Shape Builder Tool. We want the one that says 1, Shape Builder Tool 1. Not particularly exciting, we've just got some shapes. Now, these are nothing special, just like we did in the last videos, just I drew some circles and some squares and a star. Now, where the Shape Builder is quite cool, we're gonna just learn the basics here, and then we're gonna go back and see what you saw at the beginning there, where we're gonna add some shadows and stuff to our penguin. So with it all selected, so I grab my black arrow, I've drawn a box all the way around it, or you can hold Shift, click one, try and click them all. Either way, once you've got them all selected, we want the Shape Builder tool. It's this one here, it's a hard one to describe. 2 targets and an arrow. Okay, click on this guy here, it's underneath the pin. Now there's a couple of ways to use Shape Builder. Okay, so by default, you can kind of see my cursor there has a little plus. Okay, and what that allows me to do is, these are 2 separate shapes. What I can do is click in here, hold, drag, drag, drag. I'm kind of like clicking my mouse, holding and drawing a line in between all 3 of these, and watch this when I let go. It magics them all together. So now if I go back to my black arrow, click off in the background, this is just one shape that's all been joined up. I'm gonna undo, I'm gonna select them all again. I'm gonna show you some other things it does. So Shape Builder, okay, by default it's got the little plus, but if I hold down the Option key on my Mac or Alt key on a PC, can you see it changes from a plus to a minus? And it lets me do things like this. I want to delete this chunk here. Just kind of snips it all up where they overlap. If you've ever tried doing that with the Pathfinder tool, maybe you've used Illustrator in the past, man, that was a pain. So clicking and dragging across things joins them up. holding down Option on a Mac or Alt on the PCs allows you to click and delete things. Super handy. I'll show you its other really good use. So I'm going to draw a big rectangle across all of these guys, just because I want to show you something. So I've drawn a rectangle, I'm going to grab my black arrow, I'm going to select all of them, I'm going to jump to my shape builder tool. It does another good thing. Rather than just joining up and removing things, you can actually color shapes so they all overlap. Because remember, this rectangle is just a rectangle. Okay, I want to color some intersections. So I'm going to select them all, black arrow, back to my shape builder tool, go to my properties panel, and in here I can pick a fill color. So I can say, back to my swatches maybe, I'm going to pick blue for no good reason, pink for another no good reason. And what we can do is click it to drop it back in. And now look what happens, look, magic. I can just like color bits where they overlap. Now you might not find this amazing, I do. It's just super quick and easy for coloring vector. I can pick different colors. So instead of trying to join them and break them apart and make them complete shapes, I can just click a fill color and just click on one of these separate shapes. Now, if you feel totally underwhelmed by this tool, it's because I've got a really simple exercise here just to get the basics going. So remember, click and hold and drag across to join things. Hold down the Option key or Alt key on a PC to minus things. You can drag across with minus as well to minus big chunks. And remember, with nothing held down, I can just pick a fill and then just click on the color. So I'm going to close this down and we're going to open up another file. So I'm not going to save it because we didn't do anything very exciting. Some terrible colors there. What I'd like you to do now is go to File, go to Open, and I want you to open up Shape Builder 2.